Oh, there's Jeremy nearer. Right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting. Can I ask members of the public not to talk during the meeting, as this can be very distracting for members of the council and for others listening to the debate? Can I also ask members to ensure that any mobile devices are switched to silent and do not cause a distraction during the meeting? I would remind everyone that the use of mobile devices for the taking or making of phone calls is not permitted in the chamber. I inform members too that this meeting is being filmed by the council. The council is broadcasting the stream of the meeting live to YouTube. Can I remind members please that they are required to stand when addressing the council meeting? We're not expecting a fire alarm tonight, but should one occur, please follow the officers down the stairs out of the front of the town hall to the assembly point. We move on to the agenda, item 1. Have we any declarations of interest?
Yes. Sorry, stand up. I can't remember what item number it is. I've emailed them in advance, but it's the one about the charges.
Was there the food one as well?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda, Mayor's Communications. Please can members note that the Governance Working Group, facilitated by the Centre for Public Scrutiny, has organised workshops on the 23rd of January 2020 at either 2 p.m. or 6 p.m. to consider the outcome of a survey which was sent to members earlier this week with your views on future governance arrangements at the Council. Please could members complete the survey and endeavour to attend one of the workshops on the 23rd of January. Item number 3, public questions.
None have been received, Madam Mayor.
Item 4 on the agenda, motions to council. Item 4A, Srebrenica. Can I point out to members that once the motion has been moved and seconded, members may speak once and for a maximum of 5 minutes. Members may then only speak again on an amendment. Councillor Cllr Pate, will you please move the motion regarding Srebrenica as set out on the agenda?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll speak quickly, there's a lot. So in March this year, I was part of a delegation that visited Bosnia on the Remembering Srebrenica programme, Lessons from Srebrenica. Over 4 days, we were given an insight into what hell on earth looks like. We were all asked on our return to tell people what we saw and hope that the lessons will be learned and never repeated. On our return, we pledged to organise a commemorative event to mark the 25th anniversary in 2020. We plan a simple gathering in the Peace Gardens to coincide with the July Srebrenica Memorial Week. I'm asking for a show of support from the Council and its members for our event, and whilst the event is not dependent on that support, it would mean a lot to those involved. At the last meeting, we heard from Nodad Aziz from the Remembering Srebrenica charity. He spoke from the heart about the work of Lord Paddy Ashdown to have a Srebrenica Memorial Week in the first place, and the genocide that happened there recognised. Srebrenica was the first ever United Nations safe zone, with the UN base close by in Potokari. People were promised safety, yet despite this, when Serb forces mounted a large-scale attack in July 1995, the Dutch UN troops sent to protect them were powerless. 8,371 men and boys were systematically murdered and buried in mass graves in the space of a few short days. This was the worst atrocity on European soil since the Second World War, just 50 years after we said never again to the Holocaust. In hindsight, it was concluded that the people had been failed by a succession of preventable errors and misjudgments on the part of those sent to protect them. Srebrenica is not just about ethnic cleansing, it's about the story of what happens when evil people find their way to power and good men do nothing. I visited the UN base at Potokari, where 25,000 people congregated to ask for help from UN soldiers. We stood in that same warehouse where there had been shelter for only 5,000 women and children, and 20,000 more were stuck outside with no room. 15,000 of those later chose to march 63 miles over hard terrain to Cllr. Many were murdered or died on the way. I heard testimony from a soldier who said he had shot so many men that his hands hurt. When he asked for a break, he was told to use the other hand and carry on. In the base, we heard countless testimonials of vile acts of beatings, rapes and murders of adults and children. Another soldier said that when a baby was asked to be quiet and the mother could not keep him so, the baby was shot. We saw footage of 6 men laid on the ground blindfolded. Soldiers could be heard deciding who was going to get the charged up camcorder so they could film themselves killing them. Across the road from the base, we prayed at the memorial where thousands of graves of men and boys, where those bodies had been returned to their families, had been interned in the memorial grounds. This was built thanks to the work of Paddy Ashdown, who gave his all to make sure the dead were never forgotten and those lessons were learnt. Here we met the mothers of Srebrenica, those mothers left behind without husbands, uncles, brothers, and the young boys, and they suffer their loss even today. At the ICMP, we saw some of the thousands of bodies still not yet identified. They were murdered and not even left in peace. Mass graves were dug up and moved in an attempt to hide them. Remains were treated like landfill. The most some families ever got back was a small bone to bury. What was bagged as a whole skeleton often turned out to be many people in one bag, parts often retrieved from many locations miles apart. A judge said of what happened here, "These are truly scenes from hell written out in the darkest pages of humanity," and I cannot disagree. So let us not forget, let us remember them. Let us learn from what happened and stand up to any hatred and intolerance in our community. And as a way of publicly recording this pledge, I would ask for a named vote. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Can I second this motion? And quickly, I'd like to ask all the councillors to support this motion to remember those people who suffered because of their ethnicity and religious background. Thank you.
Thank you. Could members just show if they are happy with a named vote? Will you stand, please, if you... Okay, thank you. There will be a named vote. Yeah. Councillor Towneley, I understand you wish to move the amendment to the motion as set out on the agenda. Will you propose your amendment, please?
I do, Madam Mayor. And I'd like to say that whilst I agree totally with what Councillor Pate says, one should not divide the dead. Harare, Namibia, in 1904, 80,000 of the native Harare people were murdered. In Armenia, 1.5 million Armenian Christians. Hadora, former Soviet Ukraine, 1932 to 33, 12 million ethnic Ukrainians were murdered by the Soviet state. And then the Holocaust, 6 million Jews, but also Christians, the physically and mentally disabled, homosexuals, and political enemies. Bangladesh, 1971, 3 million estimated murders. Cambodia, again, the Khmer Rouge, 1.7 to 2.5 million. East Timor, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Rwanda, Iraq, the Yazidis. Genocide in the 20th century alone has estimated to have claimed 40 million lives and brings into question the nature of leadership, the power of the leader, elected in whatever form and sometimes not at all, to turn not only national bureaucracies but ordinary men, women and children into state-sanctioned instruments of murder. The 21st of January 2020 will be the 75th anniversary of the Holocaust and the eve of the 25th anniversary of Srebrenica. What better date than this to ensure that we stand together as one body at the Peace Garden, a united testament against the evil that men do in the name of God and nation. Let us remember them together. Colleagues, I commend this amendment to you and say again, do not divide the dead.
Okay. Will any member second the amendment? Thank you. Councillor Pate, will you accept the amendment?
Madam Mayor, I would like the opportunity for people in the room to vote on that amendment.
Okay. Any member? Councillor Cummins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to Cllr Pate and to Cllr Towneley for two quite moving speeches. I would be voting, when the time comes, in favour of the original motion, and I would urge the Council to reject the amendment, which is obviously very heartfelt and well-meaning, but I do feel that it is misguided. I think to attempt to remember every genocide that's ever happened in history on the same day is just not how human beings work. When we remember people that we've lost in our own lives, we tend to remember them on the anniversary of their deaths or on the anniversary of their birth. We don't just have a special day where we remember everyone that we've lost in our lives. It's not how grief works. It's not how the human mind works. I'd like to say that, of course, every one of these genocides was horrific, and in a way they were all the same, but in another way they were all horrifically different and unique. The Holocaust in particular, I feel, is very different to these other ones because it teaches us a slightly different lesson about mankind and about the power of government. What it teaches us, I think, is that these events don't just happen when government breaks down, as has happened in Rwanda, for example, as has happened in the former Yugoslavia. They also happen when government is at its strongest and when government is at its apogee, if you like. Germany hadn't broken down at the time of the Holocaust when it was being planned. It was not a barbaric nation that carried that out. It was the most civilized nation in Europe, and it was using all the civilized apparatus of the state to carry out those atrocities. And that was a shock to the way we viewed ourselves as modern people, because anyone that's looked into the Holocaust, into the mundane aspects of the Holocaust, of the orders that were put into German engineering firms for the equipment that was used at the concentration camps, these were just ordinary commercial transactions. It was not evil people carrying them out, it was ordinary people doing their ordinary jobs that were contributing to those events. And I think we do need to remember every one of these events separately. Each one will mean something different to different people. People that have particular connections to Srebrenica will remember Srebrenica more than others. Anyone that has connections with Rwanda, for example, that will be higher in their consciousness than other events. Of course, we do remember them all at times, but I think to attempt to remember them on one day is effectively the same as forgetting them all, quite frankly. And I would urge everyone to support the amendment if that's in their, to support the original motion if that's in their mind. And I think ideally the amendment should be withdrawn, but if it does come to a vote, I would urge you to vote against it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Fewings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll keep it short because Councillor Thomas has actually covered almost everything I wanted to say. But I do think that we need to, as a council, think about how we want to be doing things going forward. It's open to any councillor to bring a motion to this chamber, and I think that the amendment from Cllr Towneley is absolutely well meant and is really important. And I think it's awful that we have such an adversarial system that is going to result in people in this chamber having to vote against the heartfelt words of Cllr Towneley. So I would also urge Cllr Towneley to withdraw the amendment and not force anyone to vote against that. And I think a solution here, and I'm going to have to defer to longer standing members than myself on this, could be to have two separate motions acknowledging both events. But I think the key thing here is that one of our councillors has been over, seen the atrocity, come back, liaised with the charity, arranged the event, and that person has brought forward this motion to vote on it. And I don't think that, whilst it's not intended, that we should take away from the really important position that she's brought. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anwar, was it? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to echo some of the comments that colleagues have just made there, I just want to say, in terms of the wording of the amendment, I have no issues with the wording of either of those. But the only difference that I find between the two motions that have been put forward is that already as a council, in January, on Holocaust Memorial Day, we remember those that lost their lives in the Holocaust. And as a council, we do that in such a beautiful manner, and all of us take part in that. The only difference is the original motion put forward by Councillor Pate is that this is specific for the 25th anniversary of those that lost their lives in Srebrenica. And just like other councils, I think it's important that our council also remembers that as well. So I would, like my colleagues, urge all of you to vote for the original motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lishman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Following Councillor Fewings, the problem with this sort of formal debate is that everybody concentrates on the detail of the difference between a motion and an amendment. And frankly, I don't much care either way. I'd just like to make a few comments about the background to what we're talking about. I mean, I remember Paddy Ashdown at the time, not only of his involvement as the UN representative, but also at an earlier time when he led the argument in this country about what turned into NATO intervention. And what we're so bad at is addressing these things at the time they're happening, and the problem with the emphasis on remembrance, and frankly, the problem with the emphasis on this word genocide, which now seems to have been adopted generally, but which took a big argument to decide whether that definition was the right one or whatever. It doesn't matter whether it's technically genocide. The point is that large numbers of people are being killed in the most appalling circumstances. And the question is what we should do when we see that beginning to happen. Now, as it happens, my party was right, both about the need to intervene in the former Yugoslavia and the fact that it was a good idea not to intervene in Iraq. But what that illustrates, I mean, we've got things wrong historically, like everybody else, we've made wrong judgment. The problem is that it is a judgment, and we're far too likely to make a judgment on what to do next on the basis of what went wrong last time. Because we don't like what happened there, we're not going to intervene again. Because it did work when there was a NATO intervention or when there was a British intervention in Sierra Leone, we should do that. That doesn't make it any easier to decide, but too much emphasis on the past makes it more difficult to decide on action than looking at something in its current terms. And the other problem of looking back is, what do we do about now? I mean, just think about it. I mean, we've had a motion here about Kashmir, but look at the death toll in Yemen, or Syria, or look at what's happening to the Uyghurs. This is now. And what we should be saying is, what do we do about it now? And part of the answer to that is that the nations of the world did actually agree on the responsibility to protect, and building the responsibility to protect into the UN as a necessary responsibility for people to respond. Now, the reality of politics is that we can't get between the Soviet Union and Turkey, or who knows whose side they're on at the moment anyway. We can't actually stand between Saudi Arabia and Iran for a whole variety of reasons. But we don't actually have to sell either one or both of them the arms with which not only do they fight each other, but they also oppress the native populations there. And we need to think seriously, and British political parties have traditionally been very bad at this. We need to think seriously about the answer to the question, how do we intervene, working with whom, how do we organise a command structure that makes that work, and crucially, when do we decide that we're going to do it? And yes, of course it's good to look back and to remember the things we're doing now. But frankly, it's a bit hollow if we're not also saying, what are we doing now to stop what is happening now, and what are we doing to prevent these things happening again?
Okay. Councillor Towneley, you have a right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have heard what is said by my colleagues, and I very much respect their view. However, my principle is that remembering together is better than remembering apart. Whether it falls or passes, I will remain true to my amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Pate, you have a right of reply to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Thank you to Councillor Townley for being very dignified about this. We will not fall out over this, as we've previously said, although we might disagree. I understand why she's brought the amendment, and I absolutely respect the fact that there are so many millions that she read out there, so many millions of dead. What I would just like to say is that the original motion versus the amendment actually just removes, for a very short period of time, for a few days in 2020, the dead from Srebrenica, for us to be able to understand what they went through and are still going through today. Just for that short period of time, we do need to be there at that Holocaust memorial. We all need to be there, and it's about time everybody started attending these things. But obviously, I'm going to be voting against. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move to the vote, please? We're voting for or against the amendment. We're on named vote.
There was no named vote on the amendment.
Oh, was there not?
Not
Oh, sorry. You didn't. So it's just a straight vote on the amendment. Those for the amendment, please show. Those against the amendment, please show. Okay. The amendment falls. So can we move on now to the original motion? Any member? No. Councillor Pate, do you want to say anything else?
I think I've said everything, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move to the vote on the original motion, which is a named vote.
Okay. Councillor Anwar? Birtwistle? Briggs? Brindle? Sorry, not you. Campbell? Cant? Chowdhury? Commis? Emo? Ferrier? Fewins? Foster? Gill? Hall? Harbour? Hosker? Hussain? Ishak? Johnston? Kelly?
4.
Kennedy? Khan Arif? Khan Lubna? Khan Shabana? Khan Wajid? Lishman Gordon? Lishman Margaret? Lone? McCann? Martin? Mahana? Mottishead? Newhouse? Pate? Payne Emma? Payne Mark? Raja? Roper? Royal? Sumner? Tatchell? Townley? Townsend?
Yeah, the motion is carried. We move on to item 4B, single-use plastics. Can I remind members that once the motion has been moved and seconded, members may speak once and for a maximum of 5 minutes. Members may then only speak again on an amendment. Councillor Sarah Hall, will you please move the motion regarding single-use plastics as set out on the agenda?
I formally move the motion, Madam Mayor. As I understand that it's being bounced back to the executive, I'll save some time and not speak on it tonight. We'll save it for next time.
Thank you. Appreciated. Councillor Andy Fewings, will you second the motion?
I'll second the motion, Madam Mayor, but I would also like to make a point of order. I disagree with the assessment that this should be referred to the executive. In order for a motion to be referred to the executive, it has to be evidence that it will have a material financial implication for the council, and to this date I've not been provided with any evidence that there are material financial implications, and I think that we should be afforded as members some sort of justification as to what those material financial implications are when these are being referred back to the executive without votes.
Thank you. Sorry. In terms of a point of order, it should have an expenditure effect, so it does have to go back to the executive.
Sure, but the Constitution says a material financial implication, and if there was a material financial implication, I just would have thought that I could be given some explanation of where those costs are arising.
It could also involve capital expenditure. Yeah. Yeah, it's probably fair comment, isn't it? He hasn't understood. Suggested that it might be worth discussing that at member structures. I understand exactly your point.
Sure, so I mean I'm happy to move on for this evening, but
Yep.
just, you know, there are a lot more motions than there ever have been, and I think we do need to tighten up the way that it works and ensure that people are given some explanation. I did ask for it in advance and I wasn't given it, so you know, just in future I would quite like some shred of information.
Fair comment. Okay, so as it is a motion on expenditure, it will be referred to the executive without discussion, and then will be discussed at a future council meeting. Can we move on to item 4C, Unitary Authority? Remind members that once the motion has been moved and seconded, members may speak once and for a maximum of 5 minutes. Members may then only speak again on an amendment. Councillor Charlie Briggs, will you please move the motion regarding a Unitary Authority as set out on the agenda?
Madam Mayor, I do move the motion. I also got some alterations to the item. I would like to move some alterations in the motion due to the result of the general election, and because a proposal has now been submitted by Blackburn Council, I would therefore ask members to consent to these alterations which are now being circulated. Thank you.
Thank you.
On a point of order, Madam Mayor, why is it impossible when we have notice that a change such as this or amendment is going to be made, we actually have to wait to the item to see the text rather than having it in front of us when we come into the chamber?
Apparently the alteration was only requested about 5:30 today. If we just give everybody a few moments to read it. This is the one that's just... You want?
It's just clarifying it because this was 2 months out.
Yeah.
It's just bringing it up to date. It's really
Yeah. Let's see if Charlie wants to say anything. Has everybody had time to look at it? Councillor Briggs, do you want to say anything about the alteration?
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, it's as is.
Yeah. Please can members give their consent to this alteration, which will be signified without discussion as set out in the Constitution 14.7a. All in favour, please say aye. Councillor Lishman, Margaret Lishman, will you second the altered motion? Second motion with everyone. Okay. Any member? Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too would like to propose an amendment to the amended motion. Well, it's now the substantive motion. And if officers would, I'd like that to be distributed, and then I'll say a few words around the amendment. Thank you.
We're packing up and going on.
Madam Mayor, could I ask for a bit of a recess, a 5-minute recess, so we can have a look at this and talk about it? Obviously, it's the first time I've seen it, so...
Okay.
Just as a point of order, Madam Mayor, could I introduce the amendment before we go to a recess? Otherwise, we're starting again from scratch.
I think that would be... Yeah, I think that would be
because we haven't even moved. We haven't even moved and seconded the amendment.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just giving people a minute to read it. Can we assume now that everybody's read it? Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the amendment. Can I just say, for something so important as unitary authorities that could have far-reaching implications for this council and other councillors within East Lancashire, I'm extremely disappointed that the leader and the deputy leader of the council didn't give some explanation, at least around unitary authorities, because I think many members are still in the dark as to what these things actually mean and the far-reaching implications. And we're in danger of ruling things out before we've actually got past base 1 on any of this, even if something is going to occur. The key thing that has changed from 12 months ago that we need to be really, really careful about is what's in the first paragraph, and it was in Councillor Briggs' original motion, is you can be against this as much as you want, and we can all vote unanimously, but this council doesn't have a veto anymore. We used to have
but the government have now changed that, and it's not totally within this council's hands. So it could happen, and that's something we need to bear in mind as we go forward. Obviously, the original amendments covered the fact that Blackburn with Darwen have now submitted to government a request that they be invited to submit a proposal. So that's on the table. But since then as well, I've updated the motion to reflect what Lancashire County Council have said through Councillor Jeff Driver, basically saying that if the government are minded to invite a submission from Pennine Lancashire, then Lancashire County Council will put in alternative proposals on a Lancashire-wide basis. Now that's what we've got to consider as well. And remember, again, the original statement, there's no veto. So we have to be careful in terms of if something did happen, what would we want to be involved with? So we need to consider those alternative proposals. And in the press, Councillor Driver is quoted that he's commissioned county officers to consider which services can be delivered best at a strategic county-wide level, even if structural reform is not implemented. So even if we have this chaotic and rubbish two-tier system continuing, he's going to put proposals on the table that takes even more powers away from local councils and takes them to Preston. Is that really something that this council doesn't want to be involved in, at least discussing? So the original motion, in my view, does not go far enough, especially in light of Lancashire County Council's intervention, and it's negative. It doesn't give any indication that we want to be involved in any discussions at all. It almost looks like we're pulling up the drawbridge. And who knows? Who knows? At a point in time, after some discussions and people act like grown-ups, hopefully across Lancashire, there could well be some positives that might outweigh negatives in terms of efficiencies, status and profile of Pennine Lancashire or Lancashire, and inward investment opportunities. There's one thing for sure, we cannot continue as we have been doing for the last 30 years. We talk about left behind communities. One of the reasons we have left behind communities is because Lancashire isn't trusted because of the governance arrangements that we have. And at a point in time, we have to break that logjam, in my view, whatever that shape that might take. So our view with this amendment is that we make it clear that we will engage, but make it clear that we will oppose anything that is just the takeover of councils for the sake of it, whether that be from central Lancashire or Pennine Lancashire. I don't think anybody's interested in that. It's got to, the case has to be made. So if anything develops, it has to be a partnership of equals, whether that, and that's got to cover identity, democratic representation, management control centres and service operations centres. It's got to be about partnership and equals, and obviously it's got to be financially sustainable. And why would we not enter into at least discussions on that? Do we want to be inside the tent trying to shape something, or just on the outside throwing rocks at it? I don't think that's the right place to be. So I would like a named vote on this, Madam Mayor, and I'm quite happy for an adjournment. I don't want to get into the contrast with the childish antics that we got into on Monday night. So I'm quite happy for an adjournment, and hopefully we can come to a conclusion very quickly. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
this chair. Oh, right. Where are we at now? Oh, we do. One thing we didn't do before the adjournment, if we want to, we were asked for a named vote. If we're having a named vote, we need enough people to stand up. So if you're in favour of a named vote, please, on the amendment, a named vote on the amendment, please stand. Okay, thank you. There will be a named vote. Any member on the amendment? Councillor Newhouse.
Tap it away. Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is a very comprehensive change, but it is in keeping with what I think we all agree, which is that we don't really want to be joined with the Unitary. But like many motions that we've made as a group over the last couple of years, really, it does then go on to basically say, would you take part in the discussions? If you're not involved in the discussions, then you're not going to know what's going on or have any influence over that. So I think for us, it's quite a good amendment to the motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon-Lishman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree in principle with what has just been said. I'm absolutely fascinated, I may say, by Councillor Townsend's ability to make agreement sound like confrontation. Just in terms of a way of presenting an argument, given that actually we're all agreed on the substance of it, it probably wasn't necessary to do it quite so aggressively. But if I may for a moment do what I think is technically known as coming the old soldier, not only was I involved in the process of discussing the content of the 1972 Local Government Act, which led to the construction we have now, but I actually even helped the Redcliffe Moord Commission in 1968, and I have since then actually supported the Moord proposal, which would have been a strong unitary authority consisting of Burnley, Pendle and Rossendale, and a second unitary authority which would have consisted of Blackburn, Hyndburn and Ribble Valley, although Ribble Valley has traditionally not wanted ever to do anything with anybody. I cannot imagine circumstances on which I would agree to a Lancashire unitary authority on the grounds that, having worked with it quite closely for the first part of that time, to some extent since, I am firmly of the view that regardless of political control or anything else, Lancashire County Council has been profoundly dysfunctional since the 1st of April 1973, when it first came together and started exercising its duties. The point where I do agree, however, with some of the things that Councillor Driver has been talking about, is that there are important strategic functions which need to be addressed at a level above that of a district council, and in some areas even above the level of a county council. And I think it is particularly unfortunate that we have gone for a structure of devolution which has emphasised cities and metropolitan areas and has left even further behind those of us who are on the fringes of those areas and don't get the benefits of those structures. The logic of that is that when you're looking at strategic authorities, particularly as in Greater Manchester, where you'll be looking at local government having a significant role in relation to health and social care, actually going back to the original vision which Nye Bevan and Herbert Morrison and others wanted to be the basis of the National Health Service. When you look at those things, you need to look at something that is above the level even of Lancashire County Council. And you know, we've got to deal with the situation we have. We've got to talk about where we are now. But we do need constantly, and I think this is important for political parties, to look at this in a wider context, to think about, for instance, the structure of the North West, and how we could make a health strategic authority, crucially a transport strategic authority, which was operating at that wider level. And I think when we talk about these things in local government, we often get involved just in accepting the framework that's put on us by central government. And one of the functions of political parties is to find ways of changing that framework. And particularly when we can talk to each other, we ought to be able to look at ways of changing the framework in ways which would establish substantial unitary authorities. I think unitary authorities are the right way forward, which can have the range of powers we're looking at, but within a strategic context and, crucially, with democratic control at every level within that process. There isn't a unitary authority at the level of Lancashire. In 1972, the Act established 4 very large counties, Kent, Lancashire, Hampshire and Essex. Although all of those have had former district councils carved off them as new unitary authorities, none of them have in themselves become a unitary authority. And it is in the main only the smaller county councils which have been granted unitary authority status. And I think we should gain the support of others in local government in strongly resisting the idea of having unitary authorities which go significantly wider to the level of county councils. I mean, that will be taking our government to a level of centralised control and of organisation which goes far beyond any other democratic state that I can think of in the world. If it actually had local government operating at the level of the county of Lancashire with its 1.2 million inhabitants, sorry, that's the 1972 figure, so I haven't actually updated it since then, but if we were operating at that sort of level, we would be operating at the level of the largest local authorities anywhere in the democratic world. And you know, that is an argument that we need to be part of. It's not just how does this affect Burnley and what we want, although that's our starting point. It's how can we contribute to a wider, useful conversation about the direction in which the structure and powers of local government go in future.
Thank you. Councillor Briggs. Sorry, I thought you had your hand up to speak. Sorry, Councillor Fewings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with a lot of what Councillor Wishman said. I think that from where I come from and why I'm supportive of either of the motions actually, is that I think that decision making should always be closer to the people that it affects. That probably comes from the fact that I grew up in Wales and having all the decisions being made in Westminster affecting Wales was not a fun thing to happen. So I think that devolution and decision making should be brought closer to the communities that it affects, and I have concerns that a unitary authority would be a move to take powers away from the residents of the borough of Burnley. So for that reason I welcome the amendment. I'm slightly concerned that we only talk about giving powers to Blackburn and Preston. There are many other places in Lancashire, so I'd just prefer it said do not take powers away from Burnley. But in terms of both motions, I'm happy to support, and I just want to make the point that, you know, a lot has happened in between these two motions. So obviously when this was originally proposed by Councillor Briggs, and to give him some fairness, that, you know, the application hadn't gone to the Secretary of State from Blackburn, and we hadn't had a general election, and Lancashire County Council hadn't come forward with their views. So I just want to make that point really, that actually a number of months have passed since this was proposed, quite a long time ago. So I think that I welcome the amendments because they bring it up to date, and I hope everyone votes for it, because the last thing people in Burnley want to see is powers taken away from local people.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I stand as both a Burnley councillor and also a county councillor. I'm one of 3, I think, who are in this room tonight, so there are a number of dual hatters on. And I too believe in unitary local government. I've always thought that the two-tier system was not something we would have invented had it not been imposed upon us. But I can go back to 1974 when the change actually took place. And it was a relief for Burnley to get rid of social care, to a certain extent education, because they weren't capable of maintaining and renewing some of the services that needed to be done. So it does need to be looked at in those purposes, in those areas, if you're talking about becoming an all-purpose unitary local authority. The government did talk about the Care Act, the 2014 Care Act, taking some of that burden away from individuals and making the government fund ongoing social care, particularly in residential care homes, so people didn't have to sell their own homes to enable them to stay there. There was the second part of the Care Act, which was due to be implemented this very year, as I understand, which was going to put a total cap on the cost of care in your lifetime at £70,000 and move the asset base up to from 23,500 to 120,000, which would have taken most of the terraced houses in East Lancashire out of it. But if I can just remind people that we have had these discussions before. Indeed, I was part of the discussions where we were talking about possibly becoming Burnley, Pendle and Rosendale, and we were going to call ourselves Burpendale. And then if Hindburn joined in, we were going to call ourselves Zaki Burpendale. And then if Ribble Valley decided to come on board too, we were going to call ourselves Zaki Burpendale Valley. But the thing that really killed it off was when the leader of Blackburn had a meeting with the leader of Hindburn, and they both agreed it was a good idea, and then the leader of Hindburn said to the then leader of Blackburn Council, well, what are we going to call ourselves? And the leader of Blackburn thought for a minute and said, I know what we'll do. We'll take the first part of our name, Black, and the last part of your name, Burn, and we'll add it together, and that's what we'll call ourselves. And that's what happens when local government organisations are reorganised. Everybody goes for the biggest land grab they can get where they're going to be in charge. Just be careful about going down that route of local government reorganisation, because the other thing you'll have to put up with is the fact that if it is agreed, the first thing that happens is the Electoral Commission comes in, and then everything's up for grabs. The number of councillors you have in a particular area, the size of your wards, rewarding throughout the district and all that sort of thing. And I've been to a number of councils where they've reorganised themselves, got the Electoral Commission in, and they're going down from a 60-member council to maybe a 30-member council, and existing councillors are being told that there's not enough seats for them to go on. So people in this room need to realise that when the proposals do come forward, if they come forward, it might be turkeys voting for Christmas. Proceed, but proceed with caution.
Thank you. We need to move to the vote now, don't we, from the amendment? Oh, sorry, Councillor Commies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to the councillors who have already spoken. I would like to echo some of their words. I could listen to Councillor Lishman talk about the 1972 Local Government Act for hours, and expect at some point I will have to. Yes, I would just like to say that, like Councillor Fewings, I would be happy with either version of these amendments. And I am not opposed to unitary authorities in principle. I am opposed to the idea that just by making things bigger, you make things more efficient. That's not how things work out in business, and it's not how things have tended to work out in local government often as well. Every one of us who does any casework as a local councillor knows and appreciates the ease with which you can get hold of Burnley's council staff. You can pop up Rossendale Road and speak to the Parks Department. You can come in here and speak to whoever you need to speak to, and that is very different at Lancashire level certainly, and it would be very different if you had to traipse over to Blackburn or wherever whenever you needed to speak to someone. And equally, you can get people out to see an issue, and issues can be sorted very quickly. And I think that's something that we stand to lose in any sort of proposed unitary authority. What I would like to ask is that if we do end up participating in any discussions, that is full participation of the council, and the executive members that are actually conducting those negotiations report back not just to full council, but ideally letting councillors know what is going on by email, and so that we're all fully up to date, and it's genuinely the council that is participating in those discussions rather than just the executive.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend, you've got right to reply.
Yeah, it's only very quickly, Madam Mayor, because obviously there looks to be a high degree of consensus. There was just one point that struck me when Councillor Fewings was speaking in terms of like the loss of localism and local control and things like that. What I would just like to say, under the two-tier system, we've already lost the vast majority of local control. We only keep 16% of the council tax we collect here. 80% of it goes to fire, police, and the vast majority to LCC. And I think there is a consensus as well that the two-tier system doesn't work. So in terms of decision-making and control, actually, if you had a Pennine, and I'm not saying there should be at this stage because it may not work, but that would bring a high degree of powers closer. Yes, it may not bring it all the way, but it will bring it closer. So you have a higher degree of control over some of those things that are affecting the day-to-day lives of people. So I'll leave it at that, as there is a high degree of consensus. Despite my presentation style, I think I'll leave it at that, and hopefully it sounds like there is a high degree of consensus and everybody can get behind it. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Just one quick point. Those of us who live in the villages actually have a three-tier system because we've got a parish council as well. And clearly a lot of the constituents don't understand who's responsible for what. But we do have a three-tier system. Just on the back of that as well, you talk about people feeling very old. But the very first time I voted in a general election, living where I do now, I voted in the Cllr constituency because we were part of Cllr, and I started teaching for Burnley Education Committee, pre-1974. When Burnley was a Unitary Authority. Councillor Briggs, you have right of reply if you'd like to.
No, I'm okay, Madam Mayor. It's just the fact that right at this moment in time, I'm not for a unitary council, and going back to what the councillor said earlier on, I will, at every stage, talk to the people of this council and make sure that they all understand what is going on. Until the government come back to us to tell us what we can do, because the letter's gone in, there's been no reply as far as I'm aware of right at this moment in time. We're still up in the air, but again, I will not, under any circumstances whatsoever, put my head on the line and get us into a unitary council with Blackburn. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Briggs. We need to move on to the vote for the amendment. We did agree a named vote. So it's a named vote for or against the amendment.
Councillor Anwar, Birtwistle, Briggs, Campbell, Cant, Chowdhury, Commis, Emo, Ferrier, Fewins, Foster, Gill, Hall, Harbour, Oscar, Hussain, Ishtiak, Johnston, Kelly,
4.
Kennedy, Khan Arif, Khan Lubna, Khan Shabana, Khan Wajid, Lishman Gordon, Lishman Margaret, Lone, McCann, Martin, Mahana, Mottishead, Newhouse, Pate, Payne Emma, Payne Mark, Raja, Roper, Royal, Sumner, Tatchell, Townley, Townsend.
So the amendment is carried. That now becomes the substantive motion. I'm not going to read the whole thing out. Everybody's got it in front of them. So we just need to, do we need to vote on that?
Is that named?
No. It has to be asked for a named vote. No. Does any member have anything else they want to? Or should we just move straight on to the vote?
One sentence, Madam Mayor, which is to ask that as soon as the motion is agreed, it should be sent to our new Member of Parliament, who should be advised of its contents and the strength of feeling in this room.
Those in favour say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you. We move on to the vote then, please. For the substantive motion, I'm not going to read the whole lot out because everybody's got it in front of them and I think we've discussed it enough. So, those in favour, please show. Anybody against? The motion's carried. Move on to item 4D, Passivhaus. Can I remind members that once the motion's been moved and seconded, members may speak once and for a maximum of 5 minutes. Councillor Andy Fewings, will you please move the motion regarding Passivhaus as set out on the agenda?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before I move the motion, I'd like to raise a point of order. In terms of this motion, again, we find ourselves in the situation where no information as to costs has been provided. I refer everyone to the council meeting we had in July, where a motion for glyphosate in the borough was proposed. We're now in December. That has not come back to this council, and we're all in the dark as to when it will. And I think that what we really need to do is look at processes and make sure that cans aren't being kicked down the road. When I speak to residents and they complain about not having any transparency, this is what they mean. What is happening with these motions? In this particular case, this motion is substantially the same as a motion I proposed in December 2018. That was referred to an executive. It's had a report done by an officer. I do not see that there's any justification for this to be referred to the executive, and I would ask that you consider having a vote on it today. All of the members of the executive have received that report, have had an opportunity to review it when they sat on this council in February, and I don't see, given that report outlined no costs whatsoever to the borough, how this can justifiably be bounced to the executive.
I have a point of order, Madam Mayor, just before perhaps the legal officer. I do have a deal of sympathy actually there with the view that Councillor Fewings has actually put forward, that this motion has been heard once before. There is a report that came to this council, I think in February of this year. That report is still there. Everybody's read it. Executive members, I have the named vote at the time in front of me in terms of how that vote went at the time. Obviously, some conditions have changed since then, that this council has unanimously agreed a climate change emergency, which I think puts extra emphasis on this, that it shouldn't be kicked into the long grass. And when that report actually came, I don't believe it put any revenue costs on this council. There were capital implications, and my view in terms of capital implications are the capital budget is the capital budget. And okay, if we have to do something around housing units, you may have been able to do 20 this year, you may only be able to do 17 next year, but the budget is the budget. And but we understood those implications when we voted on it in February. So I have a deal of sympathy with Councillor Fewings there, and really I think this could move to the vote this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't mean to sort of fall out with anybody, but I do feel that it is not proper for members to vote on this motion tonight. I'll give my reasons why. First of all, I think Councillor Townsend has summed up some of Councillor Fewings' points, so I'll address the 2 points raised by Councillor Townsend. First of all, we've had a new executive. So the last report was presented to an old executive. And it's quite clear from the rules that otherwise in pursuance of a recommendation report of the executive, and if the executives change, it's changed. It's unfair because the new executive might have a different view on the motion. So that's one aspect. Secondly, it will involve capital expenditure. So we look at the material increase in expenditure or reduce the revenue of any service, which is one point, but there's another point within Rule 12, which is, will it involve capital expenditure? It will involve capital expenditure, in my opinion. I could be wrong, I'm not an expert in these things, and this is why it needs to be referred back to the executive. We took the decision in December last year to refer it back to the executive as well, because we agreed on that point, but I think we seem to be trying to sort of do something else this time. So I don't think it would be proper for the council to vote on it tonight.
Thank you. It is, yeah. Councillor Sarah Hall, will you second the motion? Oh, sorry.
Before I propose it, I just want to come back on that. I'm sorry, but we have the power to suspend whatever that rule is. This report has been produced. It did not illustrate any costs whatsoever to this council. I think what we need to do is vote on this, because we need certainty as a borough as to what we expect developers to do when they're building houses. We've seen the dither and delay that has happened in relation to, yes, that's right, in relation to the planning application that has been bounced back and forth between full council and development control. It's getting a bit of a joke. You all know what this says. You've all read this report. There is no justification for this going back to the executive.
Madam Mayor, just to clarify, it's quite clear from Rule 22.1 that Rule 12 motions on expenditure cannot be suspended.
Okay, so I'll formally propose the motion. I hope the people watching on YouTube realise how undemocratic this is.
Councillor Sarah Hall, will you second the motion?
Second the motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We have to accept the legal advice. So, as this is a motion on expenditure, it stands referred to the executive without discussion and will be considered at a future council meeting.
And just a point of order, can you give us the date of that council meeting, an executive meeting, please?
I don't know when it is off the top of my head, do you?
I think I just refer Councillor Fewings back to motions on expenditure Rule 12. It says that it will be presented at a future meeting of the council. There's no specific date in that regard. That's what the rules say. I've not written these. These have been approved by this council.
I can see no reason why you should not say, therefore, we will write to Councillor Fewings as soon as possible to tell him what the date is when this is expected to come back.
Only the executive can do that. Well, yeah. Please. Item 5 on the agenda, items for decision by the council. Can I point out to... Please note that the relevant minute extracts from the executive relating to item 5C and D have been published as part of the agenda with the decisions for council highlighted in bold. Please note also that the minute extracts from the executive for items 5A, 5B, 5E and 5F have been published separately as a supplement on your iPads. Item 5A on the agenda and the report.
I second the report, Madam Mayor.
Various accidents and incidents that have taken place in Burnley in the last month or so.
Thank you. We move to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Anyone against? The item's carried. Item 5B on the agenda, the Food Official Control Delivery Plan 2019 to 20. Councillor Towneley, will you move this report?
I do so again, Madam Mayor, and again thank the teams for putting this together so succinctly.
Councillor Charlie Briggs, will you second the report?
I second the report, Madam Mayor.
Any member? All in favour, please show. Thank you. Anyone against? The item is carried. 5C on the agenda, Revenue Monitoring Quarter 2. Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you move the report? Oh. Oh, okay, thank you. Too much information. Councillor, was she not expecting us to get to it so quickly? Councillor Charlie Briggs, will you second the report?
I'll second the report, Madam Mayor, and I'm not going to toilet, so...
Okay. Councillor Lishman, do you want to say anything about the revenue monitoring quarter 2? Okay, thank you. They're all looking forward to the mince pies. Any member? Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Anyone against? The item's carried. Item 5D on the agenda, Capital Monitoring Quarter 2. Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you move the report? Councillor Charlie Briggs, will you second the report?
I second the report, Madam Mayor.
Any member? All in favour, please show. Thank you. Anyone against? The item's carried. 5E on the agenda.
Madam Mayor, a point of
Sorry.
order, sorry. I've got to leave the room for this vote because I have an interest, which is the second one that I've had to leave the room for. But this is quite an extensive report, and I would have liked to have talked to something else on it, but because I'm conflicted on another item, I'm not allowed to talk on it, and I just want to make the point again that we should, you know, aim to be more democratic. Thank you.
Understood. Sorry, Councillor Isham, will you move your report? Just let Councillor Fewings leave.
Introducing the fees and charges, Madam Mayor. Last year we saw an overall increase of about 3% rise in fees and charges, with some exceptions, one of those being the burials and crematorium charges. This year we're proposing a 2% rise in the fees and charges, with the following exceptions: that the local land tax charges are frozen, garden waste is frozen, building control, there is a different fee structure coming in, and I would point out that that fee structure is to some extent imposed on us as part of the way arrangements are controlled now across the county. In the pay and display and the contract parking, we've frozen that, and particularly crematoriums and cemetery charges, there is a freeze there on this particular year. That's been following a review of looking at the charges across the rest of the county. There is an increase in commercial waste of 5 to 6%. The majority of that is because LCC are increasing their disposal charges by 4%. And as a result of providing this service commercially and getting such a good response to our provision, there are additional service charges that need to be imposed in order to meet the demand that we face now. We've got later on, I think, the report from the dog fouling working group, and as part of the fees and charges, the financial fixed penalty notice for dog fouling is rising to 100, and that's as a result, £100 I should say, which is a result of a recommendation from the working group. Hopefully this will become more of a deterrent to people, because it may be the dogs that foul, but usually they have somebody with them who is looking after them, and therefore they should take the responsibility of dog ownership and clean up after them. So we hope, and I endorse the work of the dog fouling group, that this will prove to be a greater penalty and deterrent in the future. We've tried to make the increases manageable, and we've avoided where we felt it would be beneficial to the community to do so. We've avoided making those rises, and I commend those fees and charges. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Briggs, will you second the report?
I second the report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Newhouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The parking charges, crematorium fees, the garden waste fees, all being frozen this year is very good for the community. The parking charges in particular being frozen means that more people may necessarily use the parking to come into town, which obviously boosts businesses in the town. It's something that our party and our group, low taxes and low fees and costs and charges, is something that we want. We believe there's probably more to be done with parking. We would like more free parking. But overall, the increases that have been above the 2% are increases that are possibly needed, e.g. the dog fouling increase. I think that we should be a lot more strict on people that are caught letting their animals do this without picking it up. And the commercial waste increases, again, were done for in anticipation of what Lancashire County Council may do with the fees and charges to us. So I think it's quite a low increase in most of the items that are on there, and it's in keeping with what we would like as a group, which is obviously low charges and costs for our residents. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, there are some good aspects to the fees and charges, and we support the increase in the dog fouling penalties. I think to basically send that message out that dog fouling is totally unacceptable, and you'll pay for it is the right one. I think there'll be a degree of surprise around the borough in terms of this council's going to be getting 600,000 extra in grants next year that we weren't expecting, and there's been many promises and furore from the parties opposite about garden waste charges over the years, and I think the residents of this borough will be extremely disappointed that you've not made it a priority after all the noise that you've made, that you've not tried to get rid of them with this massive windfall that is coming to the council, and the fact that you are going to do nothing about that, I'm sure will be noted by the people of the borough. But I do want to propose two amendments to this, the fees and charges. First amendment is instead of the 2%, so I'm moving an amendment, instead of the 2% increase in bulky waste collection charges from £13.50 to £13.80, we reduce the charge by 50% to £6.75. And second, instead of the 5 and 6% increase in commercial waste collection charges, a 2% increase in line with what you've proposed across the board. We see no reason for a 5 and 6% increase on those commercial waste charges. I'm going to speak to the amendment now, Madam Mayor, if that's okay. In terms of the bulky charges, it's imperative that we make this service more affordable when we can. We've had some really tough times over the last few years in terms of grant being cut year after year after year, had to make some tough decisions. But the £600,000 extra that the council's going to get next year gives some headroom around that. So it's a chance to make it more affordable, and it's a chance to make it so that it impacts everybody across the borough. It could as well ease the carbon footprint in terms of encouraging people to use the service rather than taking individual trips to the tip to take their items so they can be picked up by the cage as it goes round. Fly tipping is more questionable in terms of reducing fly tipping. It has been an argument from yourselves over the last few years when it has increased these charges, that it would reduce fly tipping. That's questionable with the statistics, but it can't do any harm as far as I'm concerned. Putting it up could be a risk. So this is a borough-wide alternative to meet the needs of the borough. I know some members opposite still have this hankering to bring back skips, but that just affects a few hundred people on a few days per year, where this would impact everybody. And you found the money for skips last year, why not use it on something that would affect everybody in the borough? It was £45,000 to £55,000 for your skips last year. This initiative would cost about £25,000, halving the cost. On the commercial waste, I can only call it what you're trying to do here, profiteering, and basically trying to cash cow it. When you look at the Q2 revenue monitoring report that we've just approved, there's a 50k increase on the expected budget. You have done exceptionally well in expanding the service that we brought in a couple of years ago. So well done on that, but it's delivering £50,000 above target. Now you've got them signed up, you want to rip them off by putting it up by 5 and 6%, which is totally unacceptable. Councillor Newhouse goes on about car parking, and he's right, and in the report it says retailers will be happy that we've frozen car parking charges. Well, what's this? Give with one hand, but take with the other. If people are struggling, let's help them all out. So I move those amendments, Madam Mayor. Hopefully it was clear. Basically, a 50% reduction in the collection of bulky items to £6.75 and a 2% increase rather than 5 or 6% for commercial waste. And I will be asking for a named vote on this, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
There will be a named vote.
Does this not make financial changes to the report and then it need to go to the exec to be checked before we vote on it? Is that the same as what for Andrews?
We can vote on it, is the legal advice. Any member on the amendment? Councillor Payne.
Just a perspective from someone who actually uses a commercial waste company. The council's commercial waste is £11.60 a month cheaper than what I pay at the moment, and I get a better service. I'm not moved yet, but I'm going to move to the council in the future. I get an extra bin for food waste.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, should he be declaring an interest if he's talking about his own personal interest?
I've not done it yet. I've not done it yet, so I'm not there yet. So, well, I'm not with the council. I'm not with the council yet. I'm just informing the council of the value of the service.
He hasn't yet got a contract with the council, therefore he
So I
hasn't
have
got
no
an interest. Technically.
I have a future interest. Do I have to declare future interest, like a clairvoyant?
I don't know. Yeah,
Like, am I Doris Stokes? Do I have to? So, I'll start again. So it's £11.60. I get a food waste bin, I get a card bin, and I can have extra card bins for the same price. With my current supplier, I've got a card bin, and the council comes in £11.60 cheaper. So there is wriggle room, and you're still getting good value from Burnley Council, and that's all I wanted to say.
Councillor Towneley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know what fairy tale Councillor Townsend is telling us this time. All I can say is he does not understand, obviously, the changes to the Abasa contract, and that the money he's promising you is on a never, never. It will not appear. There will not be these savings. I go with the fees and charges that have been set out, which are solid and confirmed. However, if you wish to live in La La Land, do vote for the amendment.
Okay. Councillor Pate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's just to say about the commercial waste scheme. It was a scheme that was devised and set up by members of staff who were given the ability to go off and use their own initiative to solve a problem. And part of that problem was actually the cleanliness of the town centre, where businesses were putting waste out on different days, and the introduction of a system that was affordable for many smaller businesses was designed to try and keep the waste just going out on one day each week. So there's not just the consideration of the cost, but there is the consideration of the value of that service outside of the finance. Thank you.
Councillor Newhouse, just to explain, you were asking about why this doesn't go back to the it's come from the executive. Oh, I see. I understand what, yeah.
Can I just clarify that?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll just clarify that. If you look at Rule 12, motions and expenditure, didn't expect to look at this rule so many times today. It says here, any motion which is moved at the council meeting, and then in brackets, this is the pertinent bit, otherwise in pursuance of a recommendation or report of the executive or of a committee after the recommendation or report has been considered by the executive. So this report has been brought forward by the executive, so that's why it doesn't go back, because we're considering the report.
Okay, thank you. Shall we move to the vote, please? Oh, sorry, Councillor Oscar. Sorry.
I'd just like to say I agree with your dog fouling charge. It should go up. Second of all, I'm glad to hear that the parking fees are staying as they are. That will encourage shoppers to come to Burnley. Regarding Mark Townsend's comment about the garden waste, that's a complete joke. Let's just remember who brought that in. Your party brought that in. If I'd had my way, they'd been scrapped. Because I don't believe in it. They're paying once with council tax and now again with garden waste. So don't come with all that, trying to blame us. Community skips. We will be pushing for the return of community skips for people that need them. And regarding the... no, that's it. Thank you.
Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's quite funny, isn't it? I mean, I remember when the council power was the other way around, and this side of the chamber will talk about, you know, cutting some expenses here, this and the other. And Townsend over there will go, well, there's no money. It's funny, there's opposition now, and all of a sudden, he thinks we've got a bloody tsunami of cash turned up. I mean, it can be an endorsement of the efficient running of this authority now under this new executive. But I assure you, like Councillor Towneley said, this isn't the case. We haven't got this huge bundle of cash. Going on to the charges, yes, I mean, I absolutely support the dog fouling increase. I mean, I'm very tired of seeing dog muck all over the place, and it drives me up the wall. The 2% increase in the car parking fine even, increased by £1. I made this point in the Scrutiny a few weeks ago, but so this is the idea, what if we try and round it in more rounded figures? Perhaps maybe at £5 or £10 based on a future projection. So then you could freeze it maybe for 3-4 years and increase it again rather than £1, £2, £3. Seems a bit incremental, a bit daft sometimes. But other than that, I think it's generally all right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few points, really. I think we're all in agreement that the dog fouling increase is a good thing. We've got a lot of problems in our ward in Bank Hall, mainly Cllr Street. I'm sure more than a few people know about Cllr Street because it's constantly coming up. So we have got many issues with dog fouling. I do believe that it's a great incentive and a great way forward. Just a few other things as well. I do remember that this council all signed up to the White Ribbon campaign, and we agreed to speak to each other with respect. So whilst I agree that sometimes Councillor Mark Townsend will come across and say, I am disappointed, that's exactly what he says, I am disappointed. Referring to people living in La La Land is not very nice, and also speaking to councillors by just referring to their surname and not saying Councillor so-and-so is not very respectful. So I would just appreciate a bit of respect, and I agree sometimes, you know, people come across very badly and we don't like it, but let's try to maintain the fact that we're all here for the same reason. We're here to look after our residents and make sure they get a good deal. And by arguing amongst ourselves, we're not going to get that. So, yeah, thank you. That's all I've got to say, really.
Point of personal clarification, Madam Mayor. I hear your point about omitting the prefix of councillor for Townsend. It wasn't intended, purely a mistake. I'm sorry for that in advance.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrier. Councillor Townsend, do you have the right to reply?
Yeah, just a couple of points, because obviously a few things have been raised, and there's a bit, obviously councillors over that side of the chamber are feeling a little uncomfortable. Just coming back to what Councillor Ferrier said, I did explain that there is a £600,000 increase in the MTFS in grant that's coming through. Now, you may have allocated that already, it may have gone elsewhere. You haven't explained that to anybody since that became to light. So there's plenty of leeway for some basically spending on some small initiatives. This proposal, I estimate, would cost around £25,000. The skips exercise, that sounds like it's coming back again, that will impact a small number of people on particular days through the year, probably 12 hours per year in each ward when you work it out. That'll cost between £45,000 and £55,000 if the report from last year is still correct, and we'll wait to see if that comes forward in February. And just in terms of whatever land I'm actually living in, then I assume I'm going to be joining Cllr Towneley, because she voted for the skips and could manage to find £45,000 and £55,000 when she was in opposition for the skips in February. Quite miraculous. Now she can't find 25,000, isn't it? When there's some extra cash coming in through the grants. Can Councillor Towneley not behave herself, Madam Mayor? No, exactly. I didn't think you could. So, I'll leave it there. I'll move the amendment, named vote. Thank you. Okay. fees and charges, collection of bulky waste, reduce the tariff from £13.50 that it is currently now to £6.75. On commercial waste, set the increase at 2% rather than the 5 and 6% that's in the tariff book in Appendix A. Thank you, Madam Mayor. 25k for the bulky waste. I haven't got a cost for the commercial waste because basically there isn't enough information in the report. But what I would say is that in Q2 revenue monitoring, it's £50,000 increase over and above the budget this year. So there's plenty of scope within that contract to facilitate what I'm asking. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Lishman, do you want to reply?
I think Councillor Townsend's made some interesting observations. I'm afraid I'm not inclined to accept either. I'm certainly not going to look at one particular department's profits and losses in isolation. I would prefer to look at the budget of the council overall when we make our decisions. And if one has been lucky enough to make some profit, then we will use that to the best effect across the council rather than simply remove it from the commercial element. I think Councillor Payne made a very interesting point with regard to that and think that's useful information, but I am not inclined to accept either amendment.
Thank you. Can we move to voting on the amendment, please? We agreed that was a named vote, didn't we? Yeah. So you're voting for or against the amendment?
I'll do it a bit slower, members. Eric would like it a bit slower tonight. Councillor Anwar? Birtwistle? Briggs? Campbell? Cant? Chowdhury? Commis? Emo? Ferrier? Fewins? He's out, sorry. Foster? Gill? Hall? Harbour? Oscar? Hussain? Ishtiak? Johnston? Kelly?
Against.
Kennedy? Khan, Arif? Khan, Lubna? Khan, Shabana? Khan, Wajid? Lishman, Gordon? Lishman, Margaret? Lone? McCann? Martin? Mahana? Mottishead? Newhouse? Pate? Payne, Emma? Payne, Mark? Raja? Roper? Royal? Sumner? Tatchell? Townley? Townsend?
The amendment falls. Can we move back to the original motion now, please? Straight to a vote. Any member? We move to the vote then, please. Those in favour, please show. Eric. Those against? Please show. The motion's carried. Wait for Councillor Fewings to come back in. Move to item 5F on the agenda, Treasury Management 2019-20. Councillor Margaret Lishman, will you remove the report?
With no notice given to anybody. The impact of this has been it's been far-reaching, and there have been representations already made to when we did have a government, as we have now, across the country, because it has stalled a lot of borrowing from a lot of councils. So I just wanted to make the point that we have to see what will happen in the future in terms of our overall funding that we get from government, about which we still have no idea, and I'm not sure when we will get it because of the desire to get Brexit done, maybe taking their minds off other things. But I've also listened to Mr Johnson's promises that the Tories will keep their promises to the north. So at the moment, I live in hopes.
Councillor Charlie Briggs, will you second that report?
I second the report, Madam Mayor.
Any member? Those in favour, please show. Those against? The item's carried. Item 5G on the agenda, constitutional updates. Please note that the report in particular sets out 4 potential changes to the Constitution, which have already been consulted on at member structures and support working group, as required by our Constitution, and then by group leaders. Once members have had a general opportunity to speak, each of the specific 4 recommendations will involve a separate process, including the vote. Firstly, Councillor Briggs, will you please move the report?
I move the report, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Maggie Lishman, will you second the report?
Second the report, Madam Mayor.
Oh, just noticed you were Margaret before. You're gone to Maggie now. Yeah, good. Any member? Councillor Townsend.
It's just a point, actually. I'm not sure why are we doing the individual points separately. I'm not quite sure why we've ever done that before. When it's been one report, we've moved all the recommendations of a report in one go. Not quite sure. Is there something happening here, or why we're doing it separately?
Partly it's because there are multiple recommendations. I am told.
Well, they usually are in reports. So I'm not quite sure why this is different to any other.
Would you move then that we take them as one?
Hang on.
Well, I'm not that bothered, to be honest. I'm just surprised that we're doing them separately. I'm happy to move them as one.
Okay. Councillor Townsend. Townley, sorry. Sorry.
Bloody hell. Mirror image.
Been a long time. Been a long night.
Councillor Townsend does have a point. However, a new executive and a new way of doing things. I don't think there's anything against us doing this, and this is the way we have chosen to do it. So could we perhaps please continue as was planned? If people wanted amendments on individual ones, that's why we would have to go through them one at a time. Apparently. I am told.
Just by way of clarification, there was no clear consensus at member structures, and as a result, officers weren't clear on whether or not this would go through easily, and that's why I believe the democracy officers have listed them individually.
There's a lesson there then. So we're going through them one at a time?
Yeah.
Yeah, to go through them one at a time. Any member on recommendation 9 as per paragraph 19 relating to a Part 3 development control delegation? No. All those in favour of recommendation 9 as set out in paragraph 19, please show. Those against? Recommendation 9 is carried. We're going to whip through these quickly unless anybody has any objection. Any member on recommendation 10 as per paragraph 20 relating to part 5.1 and part 4.1 on training for development control items? Any member? Those in favour? Those against? Recommendation 10 is carried. Any member on recommendation 11 as per paragraph 21 relating to part 4.1 questions and observations by members? Any member? Those in favour? Yep. Those against? Recommendation 11 is carried. Any member on recommendation 12 as per paragraph 22 relating to a part 4.1 efficiency at meetings and a motion without notice? Any member? Those in favour, please show. Those against? Recommendation 12 is carried. Item 5H on the agenda, appointments to committees. Councillor Charlie Briggs, will you move the nominations for the appointments to committees, working groups and outside bodies in the report made by the Brexit and Labour groups as is relevant?
I move the nominations, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Mark Townsend, will you second this report?
And the report, Madam Mayor.
Any member? Those in favour, please show. Okay, those against? The item's carried. Item 5 on the agenda, a complaint under the Code of Conduct. Councillor Martin.
I move the report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Members, please say aye to note the report. Any member? We've said aye. Sorry. Yeah. Item 6, Scrutiny Chair's report, cycle 3. Will members please note that we will deal with this in a similar way to the strategic plan progress reports. Councillor Thatcher, will you please move your report?
I move my report, Madam Mayor. In doing so, members have requested a one-item scrutiny meeting for the scrutiny of the Leisure Trust. On 2 occasions, the Chief Executive wasn't able to come. We've now tied that down, so just to inform members, there'll be a meeting on the 21st of January. It's a Tuesday on the Leisure Trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tatchell. Any questions? Councillor Newhouse. Oh, any questions first? Any observations, Councillor Newhouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's a couple of items on the scrutiny report, one about the railway, which have been on scrutiny for a number of years since I joined the council, probably 8 years ago, and it's been going on and on and on, and we've had recommendations, a very good report done by Councillor Thatchell over there, which sent and discussions with the railway to decide what decisions we're going to make and how we're going to do it. And from what I could remember, it was a very positive report back saying we're going to look at this and it's just want to know that on there is now a new date set. I think it says 16th of January where we will sit down, but we really must try and get these points of view across. It is something that the residents do talk about, the access that there is to the other side of the station, and we really must get on with it. It's taken way too long to try and get these sort of things put across. And again with the market, if you go in the town centre and you speak to people about what about your town centre, the market is a very, very big thing, and it is in a really bad shape, I think. The footfall in the market itself is down, the number of shops is down, the revenue it's losing every year is down. I know that there is a discussion to be had. We had a discussion about the market, and I think we do need that in-depth discussion, like discussed at Scrutiny, to actually come up with some real solutions to what our market system is going to be in the long term, and not something very short-lived, very short-sighted. We need to go into more detail and work out a proper business plan, which is, I think, the consensus that the Scrutiny Committee did come up with. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any other member? Any observations? Okay. Can we move on to the strategic plan progress reports? We'll take each report in order. I will ask for any questions on the report and the executive member will respond to a few questions at a time. The same procedure will then be followed for observations. Can I remind members with a question or observation to quote the page number and reference? Also, will members please be concise with their questions and observations? Councillor Charlie Briggs, will you please move your report?
I move the report, Madam.
Any questions? Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll keep it concise. As you've said, regarding education, PE 1. I'm sorry, I don't have the page. I'm on 176. Thank you. 176 PE 1, relating to education. Find the report what it says, but there's a huge gaping hole as far as I can see, and I'm hoping Councillor Briggs can at least give us a quick summary on a number of points. One, we don't seem to have had anything from him on GCSE results so far this year. We're now at December Council. Where is the education summit action plan? What has happened about Thomas Whittam since we what steps has he taken since the last council meeting to try and keep Thomas Whittam sixth form open? What's the status of the alternative provision school? How well is it doing since it's opened? And what's the impact of Hamilton closure having on all the other schools? I just feel there's a great gaping hole in this report because of all the serious issues and matters that are going on around education at this moment in time. And I'm hoping he can briefly at least just bring us up to speed. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
There, weren't there?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. About the GCSE reports, Burnley High School had the best report in the town, and they've been doing fantastically well since it was opened. I'm not right sure on the other people, but you know, I'm really pleased on that. Where you're talking about Thomas Whittam, that has only just shut. That's just closed. Sorry, I don't mean that Thomas Whittam's shut. I mean the thing leading up to it, the consultation has closed. We were going to bring something to this council tonight, but unfortunately we were too late to do it. But I am going to be talking to Lancashire County Council in the near future and trying to keep it open. Thank you very much indeed.
Any observations? Councillor Wishman. Yeah.
On PR1, on 176, I think the Leader of the Council might agree with my comment, but I have had the unusual opportunity over the course of the last month of listening to the current and future Member of Parliament for Pendle telling people at great length how his position as a Member of Parliament in the governing party has enabled him to provide, to ensure that his constituency is provided with significant sums of money. Councillor Birtwistle will be interested to know that I've listened to him talking about his successes with Burnley General Hospital, also at considerable length. If that is indeed how this government comports itself, so that individual members of Parliament are in a position significantly to influence money coming into a local authority, then I hope Councillor Briggs will agree that we should be looking to and expecting our new Member of Parliament in this town to deliver the goods.
Thank you. Any more observations? Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 176 PR1. Can I just say that this is about contributing to the strategic direction of local, sub-regional and regional partnerships. And I'm extremely disappointed with this report because basically it's a cut and paste from one letter from Jake Berry from the Northern Powerhouse. And if that's all we've done in 3 months, around establishing strategic partnerships, then there's something sadly lacking in this council now. The Lancashire Enterprise Partnership should be talked about in here, and what's happening there, and about making it more open and transparent in accordance with the Lancashire the work that went on to review LEPs and make them more open and transparent. There's talk about appointing a scrutiny committee. We did make a decision at this council to appoint a member of the LEP, so it would give us some influence, but that seems to have fallen by the wayside. And now Blackpool and Lancashire County Councils have got a stitch up, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of controlling the LEP. There's nothing in here about where we are with the combined authority and the 15 other councils and working together. We've talked about the proposals for Pennine and Lancashire earlier tonight, and there's nothing in here about place, are there? Pennine, Lancashire leaders and chief executives meetings. So if this is all we've done, which is basically cut and paste one response from one letter that we've had from the Northern Powerhouse Minister, it's a sad reflection in terms of what we're trying to do as an outward-looking council. And it just says to me that we're spending far too much time looking inwards rather than outwards, and to the detriment of what's going on in this council, for the town overall. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Towneley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. PE1, page 176. I, like you, are very disappointed to see that Thomas Whittam is still fighting for its life. I believe it was a very good sixth form, and it certainly provided a different learning experience for the children that it served. However, the case is that it was never full, and no case that would stand up economically has been brought forward. Also, the parents have voted with their feet. One can't take that choice away. The effect that our other schools have had with the loss of not just Thomas Whittam but mainly Hambledon is that, yes, we're bulging and we suffer under, and I don't know how we ever fell into this, PFI. It's stymied our buildings and it therefore blights our children's education. And all I can say is that whenever I'm at county, I fight for the children of Burnley because I wish to see these things sorted out. However, we are where we are, and we are tied into contracts that will go on to 2030. And unless we can break those, we will have to make do and mend and see where we can patch and repair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's PR1 176. I'd just like to respond to Gordon and a few others and congratulate our new Conservative MP. And in initial discussions, obviously, one of the things that he does want to do is look at what investment he can bring to Burnley through his role in Parliament. And I'm sure once he's got his feet under the desk, that this will be one of his main priorities, is to see what he can do and what investment he can bring back. So just to reassure the Council that this is obviously one of his priorities. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
No, I don't want to bother. I'm falling asleep. It's, you know, council over there is getting a little bit boring now, so I'll leave it. Thank you.
Deputy Leader and Executive Member for Resources and Performance Management, Councillor Maggie Lishman, will you please move your report?
Move the report, Madam Mayor. If I could just make a few remarks in that process. In relation to the Liberata contract, overall the partnership is good, but I'm sure members have noted the problems with the contact centre calls, which I've been monitoring quite carefully, and you'll see that we had one bad month, one good month, and then we went bad again. So I'd just like to reassure everybody that I will be continuing to monitor this. I would be grateful if councillors or any of their residents have any concerns over that, if they would email me those concerns so that I can raise them directly. Because I think in this sort of instance, the more information we can gather and to take back to the discussions, the more helpful that is. I've already mentioned the uncertainty around the funding allocation that we might get from central government. I would also point out that the stonework on the southwest elevation of the Town Hall is a new item. So I'm just flagging that so that you're all aware of it. And I would like you all to note the opening times over Christmas and New Year and the emergency numbers as well. Happy to take any questions, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Have we got any questions? Any observations? Councillor Newhouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's PF1, page 178. It is disappointing to see, obviously we've not met this Cllr's target. It is, again, one of the things that the residents talk about when they ring up and they try and get things done. If they're missing these Cllr targets, then the time and length that they're in the queue, etc., is really, really bad. I'm happy to work with the executive member, as she's just suggested there, to put across a few issues that are still in there. And I note that this is coming up to Christmas time as well, when it is a busier period, and the number of staff that you are applying to get more staff into the call centres to deal with this. But we really must keep our eye on this. This is the one thing that when residents ring up, they do note, and they do obviously say we can't get through, etc. So I do hope that we will improve on that in the future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of observations. PF1, page 178, and it is coming back to the calls. I don't think we can underestimate here. I'm not totally reassured by what Councillor Lishman said, because basically this isn't a small failing. We're talking about you've only a 2 in 3, only 2 in 3 calls are actually getting through. This is absolutely scandalous, to be honest, in terms of providing any type of service. So in 2 of the last 3 months, you've only a 2 in 3 chance of actually getting through. It's terrible. And basically what it seems to tell me as well is that there's a problem with retention. Recruitment might not be a problem, but it's certainly saying that retention is, and that's causing a significant problem. And I'd say, we can't keep this going on. We're going to have to hit Liberata hard on this at some stage. On page 180, it's a long paragraph. It starts PF2 on 178, but I'm on page 180, and it's the town hall costs of the works. I appreciate what Councillor Lishman's doing, and I do know that I think one of the early executives, when you took charge of the executive, you did say you wanted monthly reports to monitor what was going on, and I'm sure those are happening in the background, but we are not seeing those. So I'm just calling for a dedicated report on this prior to the Budget Council, so we don't just see a line item in the capital budget. Can we see basically a proper report that details what's happened today, all the expenditure and the forecast expenditure for the full project before we take a decision on the capital programme? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Ishman, do you want to respond to any of the observations?
I'd just like to agree with Councillor Townsend. The retention is also something that I am keeping an extremely close eye on. I do have concerns. I am receiving assurances, but it is not going off my radar, and neither are the calls, and I have no intention of letting them do so. What I would say again and emphasise, if you have experience and knowledge, email me. The more ammunition, the happier I am. With regard to the Town Hall, I think that's an eminently sensible suggestion. After so many years of Labour neglect over the building, it's about time we all did something about it.
Councillor Fewings, do you have an observation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's on page 182, PF5. It's just in relation to the governance review and the questionnaire that's been sent around to all the members. As we've seen on a number of occasions this evening, our council governance structure does not work, and it locks out many councillors from any decision making. It's quite undemocratic, it's not open, it's not transparent, and I would urge everyone in this room to use this opportunity to make their views known, that unless you're in the 5-member executive, which is not politically balanced, you have no ability to influence what is happening on behalf of the residents of this town. Please use this opportunity to express how that is undemocratic and we need urgent reform. Thank you.
Councillor Ishman, do you want to respond?
I'd simply endorse Councillor Fewing's request for people to complete the questionnaire.
We move on to the Executive Member for Housing and Leisure, Councillor Emo. Will you please move your report?
I remove my report, Madam Mayor.
Any questions? Councillor Pate.
Just to ask on PL4, page 186, on the place strategy, it mentions Jessie's Park on there. So it does say that the executive is going to look at it. What I'm wanting to ask is, what's the timeline for that? When will it come to scrutiny? And in between times, what will happen to that park if it's not to be removed over the winter as planned? I'm also glad to see the extension to that changing places that was started. I would like to ask if there are any more planned. And I'll give you the second one, which is PE2 188. I'm noting that the schools are all doing panto season. It's winter again, and despite saving lots of carbon emissions on buying new vans, we're shipping kids out to places like Blackburn for their pantos. I'm just wondering why there isn't some arrangement with the mechanics after all these years. Thank you.
Councillor Emo, do you want to respond to those two questions? Simon Goff. Thank you. Councillor Hussain, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mine was similar to the play strategy. My understanding is the play strategy was already approved by the previous executive, and that action should have been taken by now to have, especially them two parks, delivered. My understanding was that in terms of the park that's been written on page 185? 185. And it refers to Burn Street and Jessie's Park. The one on Burn Street, I think it's actually on Belford Street, is the plans that have been out into the community, it's been consulted, and we've been told that action will be taken pretty soon. But according to your report, it's saying work will not carry out until the play strategy has been reviewed. So I think there's some slight confusion. And you know, you don't have to give us an answer today. You can email me and let me know what's happened, because as far as I'm aware, the community where I represent is expecting some work to be done. And if this says it's being delayed, then it's how long the delay will be. Like I said, you don't have to give me an answer now. You can email me later. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Anwar, did you want to ask a question? Yes. We'll take a couple.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. PL2, page 184, and PE2, page 188. The first question is with regards to we will improve the management and condition of rented accommodation. And the first part of my question is related to selective licensing. That's been brought in. It's up and running in the ward that I represent. It's been brought up in Dave's House and Stonyholm as well. But my question is that I'm getting complaints from residents in my ward that even though selective licensing is in place, some landlords are playing by the book and they're making sure that their properties are up to scratch. But there are still some rogue landlords who are not vetting some of the tenants that are coming into their properties. And as a result of that, I've got residents in my ward who have had their properties there, lived there for 40, 50 years, and are having to put up with neighbours who are just causing problems for the whole of the neighbourhood, for the whole community. So the first part of my question is that how effective has selective licensing been, and how can we show our communities that it's having a real impact and we're not just charging our good landlords and the bad landlords are getting away with it. The second part of my question is, and I brought this up before and I wasn't given an answer and still waiting for an answer on this one, is with regards to our partners, Callr. The state of some of the properties that Cllr own, I understand, and it disgusts me, to be honest, when I see reports on social media, in the news, about Cllr winning awards and all the contribution that they're making in developments in different parts of the town, but then in social housing, in the most deprived and the most vulnerable residents that we've got in our town, and the way that they are treated and some of the properties that they are having to put up with and live in, I don't think is acceptable. When is this council going to hold our partners, Cllr, to account for the way that they treat our residents? The second question that I had was relating to, we will continue to develop the leisure and cultural offer in partnership with Burnley Leisure. My question around that is, again, Prairie Sports Village has come up on there. When these new developments are first introduced to us, the consultation says that they will be made available for the most deprived communities, black and minority ethnic communities will access, young people will have access to all of these, but when they actually come into fruition, what we find is that those communities that were consulted with and taken on board as part of that are then priced out of it. And what's happening with sport and leisure in this town, but also across Lancashire, across the country, it's becoming something that only those who can pay for it and pay substantial amounts can afford it. And that, for me, is a real issue, because what that means then is those at the bottom who are the most deprived, which then tend to be those who are unemployed and hit by austerity, black and minority ethnic communities, are the ones who are hardest hit. How will the exec member and this council hold to account Burnley Leisure to make sure that the leisure opportunities are there for all and for access for all? Thank you.
Councillor Emo, would you like to reply to those questions?
We were talking about probably rogue landlords. That is an issue that has been come up quite a lot, and we are really dealing hard with those. Any reports come in to me, I attend to them pretty more or less straight away. I know we have got problems up at Cleveley Street, which you probably know yourself, on the property. I've been on that case for the last 2 or 3 months, and the lady involved have been attending to her reports quite faithfully, and things are coming to a head on that one. And you were talking about the play areas. Most of the play areas with the leisure, Burnley Leisure, they really are affordable for all.
It's all right, he wants to speak, that's why he's put his hand up.
They are really affordable for all. Which do you mean? Is it the gyms or the leisure facilities in the parks?
Have you another question?
I was just asked a question by the member.
Okay.
Yeah, so in relation to that, so again, with relation to Burnley Leisure, what I'm talking about is not just, I'm talking about the Burnley Leisure and the sports development offer and also all the activities and provision, but also in terms of these offer from Prairie Sports Village and other facilities that we have, is that what is the representation and how is that going to be made affordable for the most deprived communities? And I would also, you mentioned about the play areas, that was a question asked by Councillor Hussain, but my question, then the second part of my question was about Cllr and how this council will hold them to account. Thank you.
Councillor Emo, do you want to reply to that again?
As you say about Cllr, I've had a number of issues with them, and I'm already involved with the council on those issues. And I'm going to try and make sure we have a meeting so we can bring everything to a head with Cllr and sort out all these problems we are having with the rented properties, which I know it needs to be brought up to standard.
Councillor Fewings, have you a question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Page 186, PL4, again it's in relation to Jessie's Park off Baker Street. I asked in July for confirmation that this park should not be closed, and I appreciate that this is now under review, but in answer to Councillor Pate's question, Councillor Emo said that he will speak to Simon Goff. Well, I've already spoken to Simon Goff in January, and his views are clear. So I would like to know what Councillor Emo's views are. I would like this park not to be closed. Thank you.
Do you want to reply to that?
Yeah, on that, I know we're going to have a review on that in February, according to Simon Goff.
Thank you. Councillor Harbour, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have two questions, really. First of all, can I say thank you to Councillor Emo for a very detailed report. What I want to ask questions on is PL3, page 185, and also PE2, page 188. 185 refers to new homes, and 188 refers to Prairie Sports Village. And what I'm saying, Madam Mayor, and there's a theme here, that when you look at the major initiatives, what's taken place on those two projects, the fact is that the council did work in partnership with them. They got the funding together, they got match funding. We as a council provided gap funding of £250,000 for the development at Perseverance Mill, and we've also put a substantial amount of money to develop the facilities at Prairie. But my point is that all this was done under the last administration. And so my question is, what new plans or projects have you got in mind over the next 12 months which will benefit the people of Burnley and Padiham? And I accept that it's only been in post for 7 months, but surely now we should be seeing reports coming to us in the future about where we are in the future, not taking advantage of what this group did in the past. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Harbour, on the prairie issue, on the sports issue, there's many issues on the notice board, and on them I will come back to you on them. There is quite a few in the plans.
Okay, Councillor Hosker, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's regarding calicos. I get inundated with complaints about calicos. I mean, I've been round to calicos housing. Some houses are just riddled with damp. You've got doors falling off. You've got window frames unfit. You've got bathrooms that need attention. For a main estate agent, I find it shameful. Going to your private landlords, some of these estate agents, when people are paying large deposits, I mean big deposits, I want one of them £1,000, not getting a full refund when they take it back, making excuses why they shouldn't pay them back. To me, that's a concern. And when you've been here, we want landlords concerned. When they're paying £1,000 as a deposit, and they say, oh, house isn't fitting, yet it's been inspected, they've okayed it, and they're not getting their money back, what's all that about? It's theft. Your private landlords, again, they aren't keeping up to scratch. Why do we have selective licensing? If we're not going to be keeping on to these people, why are we not going to keep on to them?
Are you coming to a question?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Oh. Okay, thank you. Councillor Ishtiaq, it is your turn now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought you'd forgotten me.
No, I didn't.
PE2, page 188. It's actually relating to Councillor Anwar's question, and I want to take it further. That is, we are partners with Burnley Leisure, and we've invested a lot of money. My concern is that some of our deprived communities, and particularly children and young people from those wards, are isolated because of, or excluded because of the pricing and their approach. So I'd like to see what executive member is going to do in order to ensure that young people from those areas are encouraged to take part. Are we going to monitor this, or are we just going to get a simple response saying, you know, we are doing that? I'd like to see some figures which come back to this council saying, this is a breakdown of area where young people are attending from and what ethnicity. And another question I have is related to Prairie Sports Village. My understanding was that it was open to whole of community. People from my ward have tried to access it to rent the place for a cultural event, but they were actually given basically given no, because you have to use food and other drinks from that. So it was cost effective for them. So could we look into that? I remember we were assured that it was going to be open to people of all community. So it's a question that I'd like to see if you come back with a report detailing access.
Yeah, Councillor, I will come back to you on that and give you a report.
Have we any observations on... Sorry, Councillor Hussain, have you a question?
No, sorry, observation.
Observation.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Observation with regards to my question, I didn't get an answer. Like I said, in terms of... but I did say you could email me by looking into it. But in terms of the play strategy, Madam Mayor, the play strategy was approved. This whole programme was approved about a few years, probably about more than 12 months ago. And the work was supposed to be carried out phase by phase. And I just wanted to know that if we have gone out into community and we've consulted and so on and said this work will be carried out, and here it says that work will stop until the play strategy is reviewed. So I just wanted to know, will the work happen or not? Because we've gone out and telling people that this will happen. And if observation. So when you include in that, when you do email me, please take that into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Scrutiny is the place for Calico to come. That's why we have a scrutiny committee. And I don't know why they haven't been pulled up before, because from what I can see, they have very, very poor performance throughout the town. So if I could suggest that that might be on the list for future scrutiny committees. As to the business arrangements with the Burnley Leisure Trust, of course, that was all set in place before this administration took over. So we can lay the commercial aspects that were drawn up at that time firmly on the side of the Labour group. Whilst we try to untangle it, which indeed it does need to be untangled, we are going to be tied into certain things that we can't have extra caterers in. It is a selected offer, and I just wish to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, page 187. It's PL4. I'd just like to make an observation on this afternoon we went to a volunteers lunch at Towneley Hall with a number of councillors. Councillor Harbour and Councillor Lebo were both there. Basically a thanks really, and a big thanks from us, and I guess from all of us, to the volunteer groups that go about running our parks and greenways. There was a number of people there from all sorts of different friends groups from around the borough, but also the volunteers that weren't able to make it. That obviously we owe a big, massive thanks to them, and also to congratulate the Friends of Townley Group for their award, for the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service. Again, a recognition of what we do with our boroughs. We have some of the best footpaths, walkways, and bridleways in probably the country, and it's a big thanks to these people that these are now continuing to grow and flourish. Thank you to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our housing team here, I think, of all the departments that we have, is the one that I engage with most. The problems that I deal with is generally them that's involved. And I have to say that they are exemplary. I mean, they always get the job done. They're always very timely. Give you fantastic feedback. I don't want to speak for them, but I do feel like they feel their hands are tied a bit with regards to the Calico topic, because we'll go to them and say, why is this happening? So yeah, we know about it. We've handed that on to Calico, and our systems don't allow us to track it any further, and the council sort of loses ownership of that problem. And then the resident sees Calico, as many do, as the council. I've spoke to the council are doing this, the council are doing it. It's not the council, it's Calico. And I do think that the scrutiny, I know it is coming to scrutiny, But if we could look at maybe ourselves and our processes internally, that would give something to hold ownership of these jobs that we're passing over, so it would allow our officers to chase up rather than just to keep ownership of that problem and keep the pressure on Calico. Because when you speak to Calico, anytime you engage with them, and some of the officers are fantastic, but others, you do feel like you're just speaking, and they're like, yeah. There was an old lady in Bruncher a couple of weeks ago. She was on to us and she said, I spoke to Calico, I've asked them to clear these leaves, and they said that they'll do it in January, February time. Like, okay, well, when did you speak to them? And it was like August, and it's like 6 months to come and sweep some leaves. There was a back and forth of many emails where we have to decide whose path is it, when are they going to maintain it, what the workload is, to the point that we actually received photographs later that week from Councillor Townsend. He'd actually gone out with a brush, swept it, job done, and we moved on. But it shouldn't come that much. I mean, I know we're meant to be in the community working, but sweeping the leaves from the Calico properties because they don't have the manpower, the maintenance of the budget, I don't think is where we should be. Definitely a closer working relationship to allow our officers to enforce these landlords. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was just to react to something that Councillor Towneley said about scrutiny and the Leisure Trust. I think it's reasonable to undertake that the relationship between the Leisure Trust and this Town Council is the property of the Executive. We will have the scrutiny of the accounts, we will have the scrutiny of the way that they do their business. If the Executive want to pass this over to scrutiny and basically saying that they can't handle it, we're happy to do that. Our role is to scrutinise them, make reports and send those reports to the Executive, which I'm happy to do. If you'd like to change those arrangements, then I'm open to that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just bearing in mind that a lot of observations have already been made to Councillor Emo. Whether he wants to answer them all at once or break it down a little bit for him. I'm just trying to be fair to him there, Madam Mayor. So I'm more than happy to wait to make my observation. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, trying to be fair to Councillor Emo because he has had a lot thrown at him tonight. But the questions I asked wasn't what's on a priority notice board for future events. The observation I want to make is that is the exec member, the new exec member now for 7 months, and I was asking on a wider scale on what projects and initiatives has he got coming forward, rather than keep referring to the ones what have been in the past. And I'm just saying, he might not be able to actually give us any detail now, but surely they must have some plans to take this town forward for the benefit of people of Burnley and Padiham. So if you can come back at the next meeting with saying, with some initiatives, what they're moving forward, rather than just keep referring to what we did in the past. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I criticise Calico just like everybody else here. Oh, sorry. Page 185, PL3, Empty Homes Programme, Burnley Wood. Start here. I criticise Calico as much as everybody else here. But on this occasion, I welcome their partnership with Burnley Council with the purchase of 30 houses to be brought back into use as livable homes from the derelict properties that Cllr's award now. So I welcome that. Page 186, PL4, Towneley changing places. Again, I welcome the installation of the much needed changing places toilet, adding to the existing toilets at the Rotunda at the Riverside car park. These facilities will provide the visitors with more profound disabilities, more comfort and more secure. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's an observation really in relation to the response I got to my question. My question was, what is Councillor Emo's view, not what is Simon Goff's view of what's happening with the park. I would appreciate if in future we could be given that. And just a general observation, which if you indulge me very quickly, is if members feel like they're not getting all the reports, they will understand that's what it's like when you're not on an undemocratic executive.
The Executive Member for Community and Environmental Services, Cllr Towneley, will you please move your report? Any questions? Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And page 190. And it's PL1 with regards to allocating. It says 6 new allocating schemes have been identified for rollout. Can you please tell us which schemes they are, please? Thank you.
Councillor Pate, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dead briefly, at the last meeting, I asked a question on PL 1189 on this report, which was about the process around the environmental health and the domestic noise. And I did get some responses, but I didn't actually get an answer. So it's not the fault of Councillor Towneley, but can we follow that up together, as I'm still getting complaints that people don't know what's going on. The second question I had was PF3, page 190, which was about digital strategy, and it was something that was just emerging as we left administration, but I'm really keen to see when we'll have a timeline for a council-led digital strategy. Thank you.
Councillor Townley, do you want to respond to those questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank the Street Scene team who do work so very hard on their very, very varied portfolio. And in answer to Councillor Hussain's Alleygate schemes, I do in fact have them here. All 6 of them. So Graham Street, Brush Street, Ingham Street, Emily Street and Dall Street. Oh, sorry, and Cog Lane. Sorry, one more. Councillor Pate, if I could have a word with you outside, as per the noise issue, I will, monitoring issue, I'll deal with that then. And as far as the digital strategy is concerned, of course, we'd probably all be having free digital strategy and free installation if there'd been a change in the general election result. As it is, I will get our strategy to you. I don't think I can relay it tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. PL1, page 189, we will implement a range of initiatives to maintain a clean, safe, attractive, environmentally friendly and also focus on dog fouling. I just want to, first of all, just an observation in terms of, I really love the new wheelie bins that have come for those of us that are fortunate enough to have them. But I am still getting complaints from residents that some of my residents have still not received their new white bag. So that's still not been delivered for some of my residents. And then also, my colleague touched on it before with regards to the cleansing and the state of some of our streets, particularly residents on Cllr Street in my ward, where residents are complaining that when this scheme was brought in, I was told in this chamber that and convinced to support it, because I was told that there would be additional support so that people would go in after the bins have been collected, that people would go in and additional support to cleanse the streets afterwards. I'm getting complaints from my residents in my ward, right across the ward, where they are telling me that actually the state of the back streets is worse after the bin men have been than it was before. And that is just not acceptable. With regards to the dog fouling, again, I welcome the increase in the fine for those who are caught dog fouling, or their dogs are caught dog fouling. But Again, if you walk in the streets of Bankhall, whether that's in the top of the town area or in Upper Bankhall, particularly Cleaver Street, Shackleton Street, I'm getting numerous complaints about the state of that. And I have logged this numerous occasions with Street Scene myself, and there's been no action whatsoever. So what I would like to ask the exec member is that how can we, one, change the relationship with our residents to have this, but also to have Street Scene respond quicker and work with the contractors to make sure that what was promised to the residents is carried out. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to those first, Councillor Towneley?
Thank you very much, Councillor Anwar. More cleansing has taken place, but I have to say that it seems to be the feeling that the more we cleanse in certain areas, the more right residents seem to find to leave things outside to be cleansed. We've knocked on doors, we've spoken to residents, and we have cleaned up as soon as we know there is a problem. More money has been spent in certain areas of the town, and I am in fact drawing up a report on that so that I can prove that we have been chased and chasing where we need to get this work done. As far as the white sacks, the final tranche will be out by this Friday, so hopefully for Christmas, in time for Christmas, everyone who was due an enhanced white sack offer will have it. However, please keep the team informed if that is not the case by this Friday, so that at least we have the Monday to try and rectify things that may have gone AWOL. As far as dog fouling as an issue, we are only just now implementing the working group proposals. So please give us some time to allow the contracting officers to go out and see how effective our new reporting communication is with people and with the officers, and also how the new fines, when caught, actually deter how many people they deter. I hope you can bear with us with that.
Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's PL1 189. I'm glad to see the rollout of our recycling bins to increase recycling in the borough. But obviously a proportion of the recycling collected will be sent to landfill for whatever reason it can't be recycled, or so there's a limitation to of the recycling plant. So my question is, do you have to know what percentage or proportion of the tonnage, is up to you, of this recycling is then sent to landfill from the processing plant? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Do you want another question?
Answer that quickly,
yes,
actually.
Okay.
I'm actually chair of the Lancashire Waste Partnership, and we're drawing up a new strategy. All of those things will become clear, and I can report the percentages back to you as soon as I've spoken with the officers at County.
Thank you. Councillor Hosker.
Councillor Towneley, you did say you're going to come back on dog fouling issues. I appreciate that. But I've just got a couple of areas I'd like to mention to you, please. One's the Greenway, continuing complaints with dog bins being overfilled, not emptied on time. I've got Graham Street in Padiham, and I've got Hampton Road in Hamptonwood Park. Going back to Bedford Place, which is not a dog fouling issue, this is antisocial behaviour. I'd like to know what we can do about that late on at night. Use was for drink, 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. Going back to another police issue, I've spoke to them police and I'm fed up of phoning them on the same issue. Overnight, I was driving up Cambridge Drive, and when I was driving up Cambridge Drive, a car pulled out from nowhere from the back of the van, parked on pavement parking. Now, if I had a bit of that wheelchair that day, I'd have been beggared. I could have been up for manslaughter. And I don't see why we should be put at risk as drivers when you've got drivers who are just parking up pavement willy-nilly, and it's just dangerous. And I'd like that issue to be addressed, please. And I'd also like to ask you, please, Councillor Towneley, regarding police meetings, you know, when we have these parish council meetings, is there a chance we can get a police attendance? That's included in your Padiham Town Council. I've been asked to ask you that. Thank you.
Councillor Townsend, did you have a question?
I did, yeah. Page 196, PF6. Page 196, PF6. So I'm right at the top of the page. Just a little explanation really, or an insight would be helpful into the extension of enforcement controls around dog fouling. Could you give us basically some details in terms of how you see that? Obviously there's a concern because you're going to do it through existing budget provision. So how extensive are those patrols going to be? Thank you.
Do you want to answer those two questions, Councillor Towneley?
Can I take Councillor Townsend's first, please? Mainly through the communication telephone line, which we're setting up for members of the public to phone in where the hotspots are, so that our contractors know exactly where to go. Yes, it'll need some bedding in, but we believe that this will at least be a start with spot checks and spot fines. Councillor Hosker, I'm afraid most of your questions are actually really for the police to answer. However, I will take them to the MATAC. All the parish councils and town council, I gather, have problems with a police presence. What we're basically being told is that the allocated police are mainly on holiday. However, it is something that we are speaking to the Crime Commissioner about. We believe that we should have a presence like the centre of the town has a presence, and I will be getting back to you on that.
Thank you. Councillor Ishtiaq.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. PL1, page 190, alligating. Can Councillor Towneley inform us how many applications were received for alligating in last year? And the 6 that were selected, which are welcome, I think it's a great initiative, on what basis were they chosen? And then how do they compare with the ones that weren't chosen? In terms of, could we have something in writing in terms of any statistics, which I understand alligating is based, it's related to crime and incidents of antisocial behaviour and so forth. So could we get something setting out that these are the applications received, and these are the 6 schemes got up because they stood out from the rest? That's one bit. And the second bit is the review programme. The terms of reference for the review programme. Will the local elected members be involved in this review as well to see the effectiveness of the scheme, or is it just the residents and the police and so forth? Thank you.
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ishtiaq. There is a set criteria for alligating, and I'll make sure that you get that. I will also give you the lists of all the alligates in your ward or any other ward that you would like. As to as to the checking over as to reviewing the Alligate programme, I'm sure if you are interested, the officers would be very glad of your input.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is 189 PL1, and it's really for the executive member. Thank you for your responses to Councillor Anwar. Yes, we'll bear with you, that's no problem, because obviously there's a lot to be doing with regards to communities and environmental services. I do believe that you have been out in Dane's House ward, which we commend actually. It's brilliant that you've done that. What my question was regarding was the dog fouling. Yep, okay, we know, we're increasing the charges. What I would like to see, and I wondered if this was something that you were looking at, is also heavily fining people who are fly tipping or consistently putting rubbish out or littering our streets. You mentioned that the more you clean up, the more people think they can do that. We feel probably that it's certain people that are doing it and they consistently are doing it. And it's something that I've been saying for a long time. I would welcome Cllr Towneley to come around with me and Councillor Afrasiab and Serish Loan and any of the others, because we do work across wards, so there's quite a few councillors that work across wards. There's been a spate of burglaries recently in Dane's house. So I'm wondering if you'd like, I mean, maybe we could contact each other afterwards and get together and go around, maybe after Christmas and the New Year, if that's okay with you.
Do you want to respond?
Thank you, Councillor. And yes, I'd very much like cross-party working. Also, I think Councillor Anwar may have told you that we have a little project ahead, which may be quite fun for all of us. But as you say, actually keeping your ward, your street, your borough clean comes down to each and every of the residents. And that is one thing that we hope to instill is pride in Burnley, which means do not litter, basically.
Thank you. Have we any observations? Councillor Hussain?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And the reason I asked the question is specifically for an observation that I want to make. And it's just not you as an executive member who's taking charge, but previous executive members as well. I've asked the same question in terms of how is it that figures nationally, and government does that, I don't know how they do it, but they've figured out that Dane's House is the most deprived ward in the whole of UK. How is it the ward that is most deprived, yet there's only 4 alligating schemes in that ward, and one of them has been funded by the Ward Opportunities Fund. Also, in terms of reporting, I've tried to get information from previous exec members. I've not been successful, and also officers, but they've been very reluctant in terms of how it's reported. In terms of reporting, one of the things I get told is residents have to report it. There has to be police reports and so on. So when I talk to my residents and say, you've got to do this, this and that, and they say, we've done it. They say, sure, we've done it, yet we've not got it. So, with your permission, can I ask Scrutiny Chair to scrutinise how these decisions are made? Because to the outside world, it seems not plausible. I'm not sure where these streets are, you know, and what kind of criteria were used, but I would like to see those decisions being scrutinised. And I think if you give permission and for the Chair to scrutinise those decisions, I'd be most welcome that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's PL1 and it's 189, I believe the text is over and I can't really read it. It is. It's about the recycling bins, and I'd just like to thank the exec member, the officers and the strategic partners that have done this rollout over the last couple of months. It can't have been easy, and like Councillor Anwar said, I've had many residents come to me and say what a good system this is and how well it is working, and I do hope we can progress that in the future to other residents of the town. Obviously, we've done 22,000. But there are always going to be issues with this type of rollout, and I think Councillor Towneley suggested that there's a new hotline for certain things, and we've got to report it on the council website to report these things. And the council has also said, you know, anything that needs, has any issues, she's willing to listen to if you come back to her. So I'd just like to thank the officers again and the strategic partners for the rollout. This is something that we campaigned hard for as the Conservative group last year, and we do really appreciate the fact that this has now been rolled out. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, just to make an observation on PF6, page 190, which talks about cross-party working groups. I'm just noting that we've not had anything on this report from either the youth panel or from the work of MATAC. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pate. Actually, we are very much including the youth panel. I mean, the youth panel is there. We send things back to them. I don't know why they're not relating them to you.
I meant there's nothing on the report.
Yeah, sorry, it's an observation on alligating, page 19 PL1. Thank you for the answer. I had a problem with this scheme even when we were in administration. That is that when we contact the offices, because the residents come to us, we would like alligating because there's such and such happening, and there's crime and antisocial behaviour, drug dealing, abandonment of cars. You go back to the offices. Yes, we've noted that. Sorry, we'll get back to you. It's related to the reporting. I'd like to know that, you know, how many applications have been made, and the ones that are successful, these 6, how do they stack up with the others based on the figures? Something coming back to either the Scrutiny Committee or to the Council, which sets out that these 6 streets have got it because their crime rate was 60%, the crime was such and such, and the others didn't. That's what I'd like, simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. PF6, page 196. I'm just going back to the response that Cllr Towneley gave me in terms of the extension of the enforcement patrols. I must admit, I'm a little underwhelmed in terms of the response, in terms of basically people are going to ring in and that'll create hot spots and then people will go out. My understanding of where we were quite some time ago is that was the service that was being offered. I know what we were trying to look at, budget permitting, because there's obviously budget limitations on anything, is can we extend patrols so we're covering more of the day so we can catch those dog walkers who go out at 7:30 in the morning before the patrols normally start, or 7:30 at night, and we try and catch people like that. Just basically the service that you described is what's been in place for many years. So I was a little underwhelmed, and I hope that we can perhaps look at that again if we're going to make a serious impact.
Yes, please. I take Councillor Townsend's points on board. However, this was a cross-party working group. So if your members who are asked to join it didn't bring these to the table, I'm afraid they weren't necessarily things that came into the recommendations.
Councillor Anwar, do you want to make an observation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just with regards to the alligating, just to support what my colleagues have said, with my observation on that is that, again, we get residents, particularly in Daneshouse and Stoneyall and Bankhall, who will report things, but it's also about how they report them. Sometimes the online format of reporting might not always capture some of the things that are going on. So, for example, in Daneshouse and Stoneyall, where there might have been a spate of burglaries, yet that doesn't meet the criteria for having alligators on some of those streets. It has been reported, it will go to the police, residents ring up 101 and they can't get through, or they struggle to get through, as most of us will be aware of that. So I think I welcome the suggestion by both colleagues here, Councillor Shah and also by Councillor Ishtiaq, that it would be good to have that to scrutiny so we can look at the ways that that might be reported, and so that we can come to a decision that benefits all residents. Thank you.
Do you want to respond, Councillor Towneley?
Sorry, very briefly, Madam Mayor. I'm very happy for it to go to scrutiny. I believe scrutiny is there to do a job just such as this. However, far easier for me to give you the criteria and let you have a look at it and judge it for yourself, and perhaps come back with ideas if you think certain aspects need reforming.
Okay. We move on to the Executive Member for Economy and Growth. Councillor Gordon-Burt, so will you please move your report? Oh, I'm quite nice and warm, actually. Well, any questions? Any questions? Councillor Martin.
Right, PR2 on page 192. I'm just inquiring of the portfolio holder whether he's got any information on what's happening with the old ambulance station on Denton Row. Because my understanding was when it was emptied out, it was due to be bought either by this council or by Lancashire County Council and converted into additional parking for the railway station on Manchester Road. That was told at least a couple of years ago, but it seems it's been boarded up for some time now and there doesn't seem to be any progress on it. And I'm continually getting pressure from residents of Healy Wood and Piccadilly Road and even Manchester Road now about the success the Manchester Road railway station's been and the increased parking that there is going on their streets. And I'm trying to fend off getting the double yellow line teams all the way up Springfield Road, because it'll just drive the parking even further and further up to Healywood Road. So the result of the situation would be, if we could make some progress on getting the ambulance station transferred into either our ownership, LCC's ownership, knock down an additional parking put in place, we could then see how that affects the parking around Piccadilly and Healywood Road, especially when the new trains, which are promised for this next year, come online, if they are going to be 4 and 5 carriages, which means there might be more and more people trying to commute into Manchester on the train, which is a good thing in itself, but does result in additional parking problems for the long-suffering residents there.
Councillor Birtwistle, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, I agree with Councillor Martin. This is taking far too long. I don't actually think the old ambulance station will be anywhere near big enough if you consider the cars parked on Springfield Road and up Manchester Road now. They're getting up as far as the bus stop. I haven't got the information for him, but I'll find out and make sure it's referred back to him.
Councillor Newhouse. Oh, sorry, no, I'm looking at the wrong long list. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Page 193, PR3, and I'll probably link it to PR4 over the page as well. There's a couple of questions. One, in the past, there's been like a strategic marketing events that this council has attended. Certainly I went to the last one in Manchester to basically promote Burnley and the town centre master plan, local plan, etc. Can you advise if there's any basically events in the pipeline to ensure that Burnley is still promoting itself outside and getting the investment we deserve? And can you give us any information about any projects that are in the town centre master plan or even the local plan to try and get these brownfield sites moving, that perhaps we've gone to the LEP for additional funding, because really the LEP is the only game in town in terms of where there's money to invest across Lancashire. So can you give us some advice about what projects you've put into the LEP to get money out of them? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Take another question. Councillor Harbour.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's page PR2, sorry, page 192/193. If colleagues can look at the bottom of page 192, where it talks about the Business Improvement District, which has been going on in Burnley, and that's great news. On the following page, it talks about town centre management, and now they've delivered 3 exciting events in the town centre: the Literary Festival, which was a success; Burnley's Christmas Party, again another fantastic success, 8,000 extra visits compared to a typical Saturday in Burnley Town Centre. And then finally, I think it says that the Light Night Lantern Parade, which also was a fantastic event. I took my grandchildren there. My question, though, is quite simple. What have you been doing in Padiham Town Centre?
Councillor Birtwistle, do you want to answer those questions?
First of all, regarding the town centre from Councillor Townsend, the main focus of the town centre at the moment is on doing Lord St James Street, and plans have been put in, bits have been put in to...
Councillor Birtwistle, can you just put your microphone on?
Sorry. I'll have to pick this up, I can't read it. On the Lord St James Street, there's a big gone into the heritage lottery, and we're hopefully getting the whole area done up, not just putting a new road, new pavements in and things like that. We want the buildings doing up. A lot of people will appreciate some of the buildings down there are very attractive but need a lot of work going on, and there's a lot of private developers also interested in that area, and you'll have seen quite a lot of buildings that have been converted in that area. That's a job, the major job that's going on down there. Of other schemes in the town centre, obviously there's the Pioneer Place that we're all obviously working hard on to try to sort out, if it can be sorted out, and the area opposite where the bridge went over into the market. That's all been redeveloped to be more attractive. That's about the things that I can give you at this moment in time. If there are other things, I'll make sure that the officers let you know about those. Regarding Padium, well, most of the schemes in Burnley Town Centre were done by the Town Centre Management. I can't really say that what schemes, other than that, schemes like this in Padium, I'm not aware of any that have been done. But I'm not aware of any that the Padium Town Council requested. I would expect that Padium Town Council will be keen to promote things within Padium. So these were the main things in the town centre. I suggest that if Councillor Harbour is not happy about that, he should maybe have put some schemes forward along with the Town Council before Christmas.
Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And PR4 and page 194. It's with regards to the Burnley local plan. And if you remember, when the inspector came in, he threw out the Gypsy and Traveller site, which was supposed to have been put on Oswald Street. But it did say that the council should consider an alternative site. And I'm just thinking, has the present executive, in terms of discuss this issue, and if so, when will consultation happen so people get to know where the proposed sites are and so on? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Ferrier.
It's double check. PR2193. Must be about town centre management actually, and probably the Christmas party. From reference, I'm using the Blue Thistles that was in Pendle, because I've been good authority that it costs Pendle Council quite a bit of money in terms of managing it compared to the cost we reprieve from the stalls. So, considering that, I see it's sponsored by several private companies. Are those providing some of the town centre management, or is the council providing that? And if the council is providing that, is that losing the council money? And if it is it a lot of money, or is it a profitable thing for the council? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Pate, have you a question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's PR2, page 192. It was just to ask, as a bit of a follow-on really from Councillor Marty. Manchester Road Station is looking really good, but I've had the occasion to go up to Burnley Central Station recently, and it's grim. You know, the street leading up to it, it is unwelcoming. The station itself looks tired and drab, and God forbid anybody that gets on the charabanc that goes out of there. So what I'm asking is, do you know of any plans to put some improvements on that line and that station in that area? And if not, would you please urgently speak to the new MP and see what they can bring up from Westminster to Burnley to improve that area? Thank you.
Councillor Birtwistle, do you want to respond to those questions?
I'll tell the last one first. I agree with you entirely. The station's a mess. Obviously, it belongs to rail track. I do agree with you that we need some investment there, and I'm sure the promises made by our new MP about the investment that's going to happen in Burnley, we will rapidly see some major changes there. Whether you believe them or not, I don't know, but I'm sure that the Member of Parliament will be reminded many times about the situation at Central Station, and whether we open the track right through to Skipton and onwards from there. That's something that's been pushed for many years, and whether the Northern Powerhouse will see that as a way of funding, will want to fund something like that, is something we could get excited about. The Gypsy site, well, the item on here has got nothing to do with Gypsy site. It just explains the new SPD, the new system within there about charging for various things within there. I have no information to you about the reciting of a Gypsy site, and I don't know whether the council's done well, I don't think they have done a view on whether we still need a Gypsy site, but if we do come up with one, you'll be the first person to hear about it. Regarding the town centre management, that is joint funded between the council and the people that own the town centre, and this item I think that you were referring to is a scheme where all the businesses in the town centre contribute to a major scheme that will benefit everybody within Burnley.
Have you a question, Councillor Townley? Sorry, I missed you out.
Page 193, PR3. Bearing in mind we are giving not insubstantial support to the CRT, the Canal and River Trust, with the development of the canal side, what is this council doing to ensure equal access for all non-motorised users along the towpath?
Councillor Birtwistle.
Well, obviously the canals and River Trust are dealing with all that, and the canals system. I am absolutely convinced that all members of the community will be allowed to go on the banks of the river, on horseback, on cycle, or by walking. And I'm sure you'll be more than welcome, providing you look after it properly and don't cause any damage.
Councillor Khan.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, are we on observations yet? Are we still on questions?
We're still on questions.
Sorry, I have an observation.
Councillor Hall, did you have a question? Oh, sorry, it was you. Sorry. You were question.
Yeah, it's just relating PR3 on page 193. Unfortunately, I weren't overwhelmed with the answer to do with Passivhaus Town, unfortunately. Our executive member seems to be unsure if any works began or not. The question I have is, will you be working with the town centre management people to deliver on this project? And if so, do we know when it's going to start? Thank you.
Do you want to reply, Councillor Birtwistle?
I'm not sure what project Councillor Gill is on about. I work closely with the town centre management on most things that go on in town. There are things that go on that they work with the owners of the town centre itself that we don't particularly I don't personally get to know about, but I work very closely with the town centre management, with our officers who also work closely with them. I don't know which specific project that Councillor Gill was referring to, but if you'd like to speak to me afterwards, I'll be happy to answer it.
We move on. Any observations? Councillor Lubnicard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's page 192, PR2. I would like to talk about the Business Improvement District. When the council was run by Labour, we had some real aspirational plans for the town. And I'm very pleased to see that in this report it includes that the town centre businesses have backed ambitious plans to create a business improvement district, a bid. This was originally something that was on the portfolio, I believe, of Councillor Asif Raja. And I'm very glad that that's gone through. So I hope that obviously we carry on in this vein, because there was some great plans for this town with some addition of some new shops and new businesses coming into town and investing in Burnley. And I'd like to see that carry on.
Councillor Hussain.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm not sure what the cabinet member executive member for regeneration has not done any work. Is that question from a colleague there about Passivhaus and another colleague from Passivhaus? He doesn't have a clue. He claimed to be the best MP in Burnley, but he seems the worst cabinet member for regeneration. The reason I'm saying that, Chair, is because the inspector, when he approved the local plan and he threw out the bid for the Gypsy and Traveller site, what he said was there's a legal responsibility for the council to provide provision for that community, and that the council should look at alternative sites and so on. I'm surprised that it's not on his to-do list on his desk, and he's saying he doesn't know nothing about it. And are you on the executive? You know, you've had questions about so many. You're an experienced councillor, for God's sake. You've been on here for God knows when, you know, but you don't seem to have any clue as to, people have genuinely asked you questions and you don't seem to have any answers. You don't care. Next time when you come, please have answers. And also, with regards to that Traveller site, have a look at it, because I'm going to follow it up and I'll start asking you questions.
Councillor Tatchell, have you an observation?
Yes, Madam Mayor. At the risk of sounding like we've got two executives running the same council, the answers to Councillor Martin's questions that the executive member was going to go away and find out about the railway station and the things around it. If you'd like to be a guest at the scrutiny meeting of the 16th of January, that'll be the first question on the night that I'll be asking. The Network Rail people and the Lancashire County Council will be there to answer questions on that, so that those answers should come out.
Thank you. Councillor Fewings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's PR2, page 192. Quite a few people have mentioned Burnley Manchester Road Station and the parking issues for the residents around it. Just wanted to make some observations on that. There's lots of research out there that says when you provide more parking, more cars will come. Knocking down the ambulance station and providing a few parking spaces is not going to deal with this issue. The residents have been struggling on that road before Burnley Manchester Road Station was commuting people into Manchester, because when there's football games and things, it's very close to the town and people park there anyway. This is not just a parking for the station issue, it's a general highways issue, and I think that it would be quite useful for the Councillor Martin, who has been the councillor for that area on Lancashire County Council, who are responsible for highways, to have a conversation with the executive member for growth and see if they can do something about the situation, given his privileged position on Lancashire County Council. In terms of the other changes that need to happen in Burnley Manchester Road Station, I was going to say exactly the same thing as Councillor Tatchell. The Scrutiny Committee is looking at this. There's a lot more problems other than making it fit for private car owners. There is no disabled access between platform 1 and 2 without going out onto the main road. This is an absolute priority. We shouldn't be subsidising private car owners over people that really need accessibility issues at the station. And also, it creates quite a lot of traffic. It's opposite the cinema, and there's no pedestrian access between the station and those amenity provisions. I wrote to Lancashire County Council about this, and they said there is a crossing at the Spa on Manchester Road. Anyone that knows Burnley at all would know that's 1 mile up a very steep hill. So there are a lot more problems with the station for residents than just providing free parking for private car owners. So please look into it as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can't overemphasise really, Madam Mayor. Sorry, page, I'll go back to I'll do it properly, page 192, 193, PR2. I can't overemphasise really, Madam Mayor, how disappointed I was with Councillor Birtwistle's answer to my question. It was a genuine question, and basically what he seemed to say to me is all the events what took place in Burnley Town Centre had nothing to do with this Borough Council. It was some management group there. We had no input whatsoever. Financial input with people. That's the impression he seemed to give. Then when we asked him about Padiham, he basically turned around and said, well, Padiham can do what it wants. Nobody's told me about Padiham. And this is a current theme with this man, because if you remember at the last meeting, my colleague asked him about what were the strategic objectives in Padiham. It's there in his portfolio. He's responsible for it. And he didn't know. And we spelt it out to him about the public realm work, about the flood defences, and about town heritage bid. This was not almost 3 months ago. He comes back to another meeting with another report and not a word about Padiham. So I'm just hoping, Madam Mayor, that at the next meeting, hopefully over the Christmas New Year break, he'll come back refreshed, invigorated, and he might have some answers for us. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to, just on a positive note, I just want to say that with regards to this report the exec members provided, I think there's some fabulous things going on. But one thing that I do notice is that with this exec, whenever things go wrong, they blame the Labour group. So I'm hoping that now that things are going well, or things have gone well with this, they will pass on the credit where it's due. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. PR3, Just in reply, again, Burnley has a somewhat troubled relationship with health and well-being, and the equestrian sector in Burnley brings in £8 million every year. It's also the single activity that a lot of older women and younger children do. And we are working with a partner who has said to my face that they will not allow access along the towpath because it is not their policy, and yet this towpath in Burnley is the arterial route to all the safe greenways and outside bridleways in this borough. Are we not going to fight for the right of our riders, walkers and cyclists to recreate together to keep themselves healthy, wealthy and wise, one hopes? Or are we just simply going to say we will give money to a partner who offers us nothing back?
That negotiation is going on, and I can do that. And I thank Councillor Almore for his comments. There are some great things in that today. I don't answer observations that are abusive and totally uncared for from Councillor Shaw. I'm sure.
Could you actually tell me where I was abusive?
I didn't mention you. I didn't mention.
Right, we're not getting into a slanging match one against the other. Have you finished answering Councillor Birtwistle?
I have finished.
Thank you. Right, can we move on, please? Item 8, questions.
None have been received, Madam Mayor.
Item 9, exclusion of the public. Councillor Charlie Briggs, will you move that the public be excluded from the meeting for the next item on market investment?
I move that, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Margaret Lishman, is that seconded?
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Can we ask